Hello everyone, Rudros here with my good buddy Jared Wallace, Eureka, all the way from Japan to help me break down the next 3 elements in Opus 21 Beyond Destiny. Jared, how are you, sir?
Good. How about you?
Excellent, excellent. Happy to have you. Well, let's waste no time. If you haven't seen the first video, go back and watch it. We break down Fire, Ice, and Wind. Otherwise, let's jump right into Earth with a beautiful Ursula full art card. God, I love this pose. I really love this art. This art is great. Now, another one of these EX Burst hate effects. This one's obviously tied to crystals. She can just gain 3k. What I like about this EX hate is that it blankets your entire field. So, yeah, very, very nice. Again, doesn't turn off anything that lets them draw or search or whatever, but it's nice to basically have the Opus 4 wall text again. That being said, you can't really use it in monks. I don't know if anyone's even playing monks, but if you're trying to, the other Ursula is basically what that deck is, so I can't see you sliding this over that. That being said, the one place that I immediately came to mind was, well, I don't even know what you'd call, I guess, the Category 4 deck that kind of existed last set.
Yep.
Whether it was Earth or Earth Water, and, Cecil, he liked the crystals as well. It's another body for Rydia. It's a different name that you weren't really using before to get a Rydia counter. Granted, that deck kind of fell off a little bit towards the end of the Opus, so I don't know if that's going to stick around. But other than that, I like the art. I like the idea of the crystals, but I'll be surprised to see her show up anywhere but there. How do you see her?
Yeah, the card just feels like really, really low impact compared to a lot of the other things that you can be doing in crystals. I do mostly agree that, like, if you're playing a Category 4 deck and then you Rosa into Cecil, and then you change your Cecil into the water one and you start generating a lot of crystals, getting a lot of crystals is really good. I just don't know, that deck doesn't really have a huge crystal payoff, and this is not it. This you're not turning your crystal. It's not like Glaciella where you're turning your crystals into removal. It's not like she spends a crystal to deal damage equal to her power like the other one. I thought that was something that this card was potentially going to be able to do, but I don't know. It was just not. I'm not immediately impressed, and it's not immediately clear what I'm supposed to be doing with the card. So I just have a hard time expecting this to really change anything. Yeah. I think it's a really, really big tease that they gave us, a new 2 CP monk, which is an Ursula target, but the card name is Ursula.
Yeah.
I still think that Ursula is still just a really messed up card. The old one, right? The 4 CP one is still just a really messed up card, and they just feel like they just never want to release another good target for it, so yeah.
Well, and if her 3k crystal buff could target something else, I'd immediately,
that would be a lot better.
She's so self-centered, she just protects herself, and then who knows, if they don't even hit a burst, then that effect doesn't matter. So whatever. Yeah. All right, what about Mr. Ash? Another monk. Got to have another monk. So you're probably not going to play him in monks. I don't know, maybe you do. He does deal with brave forward, so. But he also obviously wants to have Strangers of Paradise, just like pretty much all of them do, to get back a character from your break zone. Again, I'm kind of a homer for these old school action effects of hey, he can attack with Brave and then dull himself to give something else Brave. That's kind of neat.
Yeah.
I mean, other than that, I don't know. It's the very generic get a character back from your break zone effect, which is very good. You can play Jack and then have Ash immediately get something back. I don't know what else to say about it beyond that, because that's just kind of all he is. What do you think?
Yeah, it's very, very straightforward. I think this is the best of the 4 party members from SOP. I think the big notable thing is that Ash gets back a character, and there's just no restriction on that. He can get back another copy of himself, which is not something that these cards generally tend to do. So I have just kind of played Ash, add back Ash, block with Ash, and then just next turn just play Ash. I have done that a few times in 4-color wall when I just have SOP characters on the board. Additionally, all of these are templated such that they work with Cecil, so that if you play Ash and don't have another SOP, you still choose, because it only checks on resolution. It's not a condition. It's not a conditional auto like lock or whatever it is. So you can just play Ash and then Cecil change and then get another SOP person with the win one, and it'll resolve. So I think that these cards are pretty flexible. I do like this one the best out of them. I think that's just because Jack Garland tends to work really well in the Earth cores in general, because you have like Tyro to search him, and flexibility to play the other party members even if you're not actually playing those colors. So yeah, I think this is probably the best one. This is the only party member I would be tempted to play 3 of if I was playing Jack in my deck, because yeah, just like cycling himself is so good. Additionally, I do think there is a niche potential to be playing Ash and Jack, and maybe one of the Lich or something in Monks. It doesn't seem bad. It doesn't seem particularly great, but like he does make your board like really ridiculously huge.
Yeah.
And a good way to get back Ursula that wasn't just like Kusa for it or whatever is something that the deck did want. So yeah, I think it's probably fine there. I don't know if Monks is a good deck, but that's kind of like a separate issue, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, what about the Dark Knight deck, man? I think it was Opus 8. There's some Dark Knight that came out back in like Opus 6, 7, 8, and he had this exact same text as the more damage you took, the stronger he gets. And which I love that concept. It's very thematic. I just wish, 15 sets later we like had come up with something else. Technically his action ability is a very good cost ratio that you dull crystal and you can break any forward. That is strong, but you got to wait a whole turn. He's just a 6K, pretty much pack fodder.
Yeah, I agree that the action ability is strong, and if it was on like a better body or like some different card or like a different effect in with it, then yeah, I would be like totally into the card, because the action ability is very strong, but like it's just kind of a bad card that also has an okay action ability on it. So
yeah. Well, next we have our first Earth Legend. This is Ingus, and finally he is very late to the party. His other portrait pals showed up many opuses ago, but Ingus has finally run from it. Ingus finally arrives. The card is insanely straightforward. I was actually surprised by how many people were going gaga over this card. Not because it's not good. It is. It's just, it's so straightforward and doesn't do anything other than what it does. I was like, am I missing some text here? Like, people are acting like this is the second coming. He's basically water ash except for earth, except instead of removing something, he searches out anything you can. I've seen people run it in mono earth. Yeah, amazing. One cost, pay 1 CP. You have a 9K that gets you whatever you need from the deck. And sometimes you need that board wipe, or sometimes you want that Leo, or whatever it is you're searching for. Unequivocally good, and it's on an EX burst. It is a no-brainer if you're playing mono earth. And that's about it, because he doesn't say anything else.
Yeah. I think a lot of people were expecting this card to be like a Warrior of Light synergy card, because it's the last in the Matsuda series, and those all are like super heavy Warrior of Light synergy cards. No, they just completely threw that out the window and just like made him like the best mono earth card that we've gotten since like Montleonis. Obviously, mono earth kind of showed up here and there. I played a lot of it in competitive events last set. I don't think the deck is just very good in general. I know it sounds crazy because I played a ton of it, but I thought it was like the best among like bad options. So I will say that like one thing about the deck is that it's a deck that you're kind of required to only run a few of some of your very best cards. Like you can't really run like 3 Genova Synthesis because it just doesn't work until you get 4 backups or 5 backups. So like it is pretty difficult. You can't. It's sometimes even hard to run like 3 Montleonis because you need to be like already so far into the game for it to be good that it's difficult to justify playing 3 of it in your deck, even though it is so powerful. So I think that Ingus does fit really well into the kinds of builds that Mono Earth wants to play, but even then, he doesn't always search like the kind of stuff that you want to do. Like if you're playing Leo, a lot of the time you're going to be playing some off-color. Like I was playing Go-Go last set because I wanted to do Go-Go Hippocampus, and Ingus doesn't search for any of those cards. Like it doesn't cover. If you're playing monsters specifically, it doesn't really cover the same ground that it kind of looks like it would on paper. I think you actually need to be playing like a forward-focused Mono Earth deck for this to really shine. I think if that kind of deck exists, obviously no brainer, you're just slamming 3 of this. It has EX burst, why wouldn't you do that? Are you an idiot? Kind of thing. But it is difficult for me to see right now, like how Mono Earth is actually just ever going to compete with like Warrior of Light, and especially when it's so weak to aggro in the first place. That I just don't know.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Warrior of Light, so we're going to spend the rest of the video talking about this card, which is Job Warrior of Light, also Job Onion Knight. So since there's nothing to say about this card because it has no text, I'll just take a little mini rant here as just an American kid looking at this game. There has to be someone on the design team who thinks that power is still super, super relevant in the game, because why else would you? Because technically, right, it is below curve, above. I guess you'd say it's above curve. Like technically, the curve, you know, 3 cost 7K, 4 cost 8K, 5 cost 9K, 3 cost for 9K. Yes, that is a great stat line, but I don't think that's been relevant in modern TC. Like a card can't just be a body. It has to do something. It has to further the board state or increase your own economy or something. Like, I mean, not even Brave. You can't even get the Brave keyword in Opus 21. Was it meant to just be a joke? Did someone really think this was good? I don't know what to say. I legit had to like refresh my page. I was like, wait, is my image not loading right? Where's the text? I'm missing something here. So I didn't know I'd have that many words about Onion Knight, but there you go. Anything to add, Jared?
Yeah. I can make a niche case for this card, and that's if you have like an Earth Water Warrior of Light deck for some reason. He is like the only Earth forward Warrior of Light that like we're ever interested in playing. There's just like none other even exist. So like if you're playing Raphael, obviously the number of Warrior of Light forwards you play matters. So I could potentially see this card just seeing play like as a one of randomly in some Warrior of Light deck. I don't think I'm ever going to slot it, but I think you could do worse than a 3CP9K, so I don't know.
There you go. Put that on the card text. That should be 6. You could do worse.
Yeah.
Speaking of
we're gonna get to one.
Yeah, speaking of doing worse, Guy here. Man, I don't know what it is about Guy. He just seems to struggle to get good cards, although I did like his Opus 15 Fire one. Like, again, I guess it would have been above curve if he was just an 8K naturally, but having to wait till he attacks to then get 3K, which goes on the stack, which means they can just Brynhilder him or whatever else in the world. Like, he's a warrior, and yeah, there's warrior support, but surely there's better warriors and there's better guys you can use than this guy. Like, do you see him showing up anywhere?
I think he's a concession for limited, is what he is.
Fair enough. Next, we have a card that I did build a deck around, but I haven't gotten to test it, so I don't know how good it is. This is Galuf. He's fun. I put him in a deck based kind of Earth Water, but around like Sophie and Sarah Mobius, because he double buffs Sophie, not only his own element and then the 2K. And it's a fun concept. Again, I didn't even get to test it out. I was just like, well, that's kind of cool. Like if you jam your deck and you can put in off-color 2 costs. You could put in like the multi-legend Furion, the multi-color Zidane. A lot of fun cards to pick with. That being said, is that better than something like a Water Golbez? I don't know. And maybe that's not a fair comparison, but this is a one-time, you get a 2 cost, you play it for free, where something like Golbez obviously threatens to... Golbez and Noxizaku all threaten to crap stuff out turn after turn. Maybe that's not a fair comparison. I do like the card. I'm going to try that deck to see if it's any good. There's Galuf. What do you think?
I think he's just fine. He's got a good... DFF is now randomly like a good category, so like you can search him with Bards, and then a lot of the cards are going to be playing in like a Bards deck is going to be like the 2-drop, the Fury and the Zidane and stuff like that. So he has a pretty good chance of hitting something worth playing. I think my biggest problem with him is his color is just like not really in line with like the card. Like you want to play like Zidane off of this card. That's a Fire Wind card, and you're playing like an Earth dude. Like I don't know how exactly that's supposed to work. He doesn't really work with like the Warrior of Light either. He's kind of like a miniature version of that card, and like which is a lot less powerful, obviously, because 3 costs are a lot better than 2 costs in this game in general. I don't know. I think if I'm going to be playing him, I've already played against people who are playing him as like a, just like turbo this out and just like play all the 2-drops you can, like play Ghetto into Zidane and like have this guy turbo out and everybody's really buff and you just like attack and kill him really quickly. I think that deck has been pretty underwhelming, so I think if you are going to play him, you have to be playing some amount of backups and actually have a game plan that Galuf kind of synergizes with, rather than just jamming all of the good 2-drops in the game and just turboing him out as quickly as you can. I don't think that that's a winning strategy. That being said, there is, again, a lot of overlap with like the DFF stuff. Bards, Onion, the 4 CP Onion Knight, you know, like kind of overlaps a lot of the same targets as Galuf, and you're gonna, if you play the Wind Warrior of Light, that is the new DFF one too, then this Galuf is gonna generate a crystal, which also kind of like feeds into that. So if there is some kind of like weird DFF aggro that still gets to play backups, I'm a little more on board with this Galuf. Just like, well, I look at all the cards and like I'm immediately in like 4 colors, and I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing with the cards at any given point in time, and that just makes it difficult to really get behind, I think.
Yeah, very fair. Next we have Kikirin. This card, yeah. I think I read it about 10 times before I actually absorbed what its text was. I guess like my eyes just glossed over because it's like, okay, you know, your real top 5. Yeah, like again, I guess I feel like I've seen that so many times. However, it just hits a forward. That's the only restriction, and forwards generally are going to be the highest card count within your deck. So it's very unlikely that you won't hit at least one of these, unless you're me. Of course, I'll find a way to whiff somehow. It is a 3-cost backup, so it fits with the new Warrior of Light legend. And even though they don't realistically come up very often, I always appreciate when a backup kind of has this emergency effect of like, hey, if you absolutely have to, you can get rid of me to kill this thing, you know, keep yourself alive. Yeah. And again, I tend to praise those effects, even though when I really think about it, I was like, how many times have I actually used those? Like maybe 1 in every 20 games. Still, it could have just been blank and had no text there, so I appreciate that. I don't know if there's a specific deck he goes in, but he's also just very generically good, so you could probably slot him anywhere. So overall, I think I like this card.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty on board if I'm playing Wall in one of my the new Warrior of Light and the 7CP1, and one of my primary colors is Earth. Yeah, I mean he's gonna go in there. You know, he's never gonna miss. Basically, fingers crossed. He is literally just minor, but for forwards.
Yeah,
minor. You can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think that's like, people are going to be on both sides of that. You kind of choose whichever one you want to do. I think that the active is considerably better than minor. Minor's got this... It's kind of like more in line with Loprite, whereas Kikirin is like a little more in line with Vera. I think it's a lot more functional than that. I think that having removal that's breakable on a standard unit backup is a lot more potent than these kind of cantrip effects that the other ones have.
Yeah.
So I do quite like the card. Some other potentially noteworthy stuff is being a category 11 is potentially something that could be on the table for like some weird semi-Lafina Star Sybil thing. That's if you were playing a lot of 11 backups, that could be something that you potentially think about. Probably not, but maybe. But yeah, I think it's just a pretty straightforward card.
Next, we have Lady Kryl, and I kind of just dismissed this out of hand when I first saw it, because I was like, we already have a Kryl backup, and that one's got a burst, and like, granted, we don't have Sildra anymore, and it has Job Warrior of Light, which probably isn't super relevant right now since it's on a backup, but maybe it adds to again, like,
what's to the Refia account,
but again, so, obviously competes with the other one. That being said, what I do like about it is that I always appreciate, I don't generally like backups that have a kill effect on entry, because again, generally, you want to get your backup set up, and if you're being forced to do that immediately, it's like, well, maybe I don't need it. So I like that you can just play this as a 2-cost, and that's it. You don't have to. But hey, if your opponent puts out Hope Vanille turn 1, and you turn 1 Kryl, get rid of a summon, and take the Hope off the board, that's not bad. That really isn't. And then the action effect, well, maybe a hair pricey. Again, if they're, hey, I'm going to revive some big thing, okay, emergency Mist Dragon, pull it from my break zone, cancel that anyway. So she the more I read her, the more I actually liked her quite a bit. Does she compete with the other Kryl? I mean, they do very different things, so I don't know. But yeah, I've come around on her. How do you see her?
Yeah, I think the big one for me is the very obvious place for this is Arc. You know, like if you have Arc, you need a way to discard your Arc on like turn 1, turn 2. When is the Chaos Arc deck the most vulnerable? On like turns 1 and 2. So, you know, it just kind of fits really well. If you're playing Earth Lightning specifically, I would be very surprised if we didn't play one of this. You know, it's just kind of like, it just works there. Obviously, you can add back the arc leader when you need it the most. It's kind of like Echo in that regard. So one of the things was that like we kind of moved away from water Chaos Arc because it's just like so bad versus removal that like having Earth Lightning and not decking yourself out was something that was very important. So one of the cards we missed the most was Echo. So Krill kind of filling in that same sort of slot is pretty neat, I think.
Yeah. Next, we have White Mage, which is my main job for Final Fantasy XIV, or at least it used to be before I switched to Red Mage, which is appropriate because when I read this, I was like, oh, it's Alice at home. You just take the 3 costs and you put it right onto the field for the same amount. The same stat line and everything. Are there any standard unit forwards of 3 that you would really want to play? Maybe if you're doing a new thing with Vikings. Unfortunately, Durando doesn't work with that, but... And you could revive some of those blue Vikings, like... Maybe there. Other than that, I can't think of a standard unit right now that I'm like, oh my gosh, getting to play it for free off of this would be busted. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm in the same place. I can't think of anything that's really busted about this one. It does, like an Ali's Hay for standard units is like, yeah, that seems totally fine. Like I have no qualms with that. I haven't really like delved into the depths of the standard unit like archives, and like try to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing with it. But I would have to imagine that like your primary target for this is Viking. Like it's just kind of like it's like, hey, have another Layla, bro. Yeah. Like, that's kind of what it looks like to me. I'm like, okay. I don't know if we're playing like Earth, Water, Vikings, but if you do, hey, more power to you. I think that looks pretty fine. So, yeah.
Excellent. Next we have Titan, a card that I'm so confused why I feel this way about it. And maybe you can illuminate my thoughts for me. Because he reads... I think he's kind of the opposite of whatever one we said earlier that didn't read very well. He reads really well. 9K to any forward. A lot of times these Earth ones are, it's got to be 4 or higher, or it's got to be dull. They're just 9K to anything. Yeah, for a 3 cost. That's really good. That's almost like a fire effect. Or... you can do any dull forward and break it. Now, the only restriction, he's got to be an Earth, but again, Earth has never really had great removal summons. So, like, that text reads really well, and yet for some reason, I don't find the card exciting. Like, I'm not like, oh my gosh, like, this is going to be so good. Is it just because Mono Earth just isn't that exciting? Is there some other hidden thing I'm not seeing here? Because he reads great, but I don't know. I'm not feeling it. How do you see this card?
I would describe this as a really, really good card that changes nothing. Like it's not like this card comes out and all of a sudden like mono like even with Ingus too. Like Ingus and Titan come out and all of a sudden Mono Earth is like a new deck. That's like not what's happening here at all. It's like it isn't completely renewed and like suddenly like super super playable. I think the other thing is these Earth decks have kind of been trending towards like playing multis or like you play a bunch of monsters and you don't really have a ton of room for cards like that. You can't just like jam 3 Titan into your Mira deck. It just doesn't work like that. You don't get to do that. I think if this was a monster, we would be like jumping for joy because it works with Mira. But like this card doesn't really work with other Mono Earth cards. It's just kind of like a generically good card. If you're playing Mono Earth and you have room for it, if you're building constrictions allow for it, yeah, obviously like a just really sick card and we're gonna play it. Like, is that always gonna be the case? Probably not. And am I gonna like suddenly switch from playing Mono Water to playing Mono Earth because it got this in Ingus? Probably not, so I just don't really know what they want us to be doing with Mono Earth. If we're supposed to be playing Leo and Riku and all of the multis, that seems like the best place to play this card. But like we've seen that deck isn't really super consistent or successful, and maybe Titan and Ingus change it, maybe they don't. But like I kind of lean towards just a good card that doesn't really change the dynamic of the deck in any way.
You said it perfectly, seriously. That's why I love having you on here. Well, let's see what you think if this guy is going to change things up. This is Tulian. I really like this design. 1, it's increased damage through battle, and I'm always a fan of those effects. Yeah. But 2, I've always liked... kind of in any game, I always like when there's cards that kind of force you to do something. Like, well, I would never attack this turn, but you're going to have to attack. Well, I would never block this turn. Now you're going to have to. Kind of similar with the old, like, Flandit tax style. I just like that idea of, like, hey, you got to do this thing right now. Now, That being said, liking that idea and knowing it's powerful are obviously two different things. Again, I haven't gotten to test the warrior package myself, so I don't know how this fits with Tyvis and the other guy we're going to talk about coming up here shortly. Obviously, he can be played for free off of Tyvis, which is quite nice. I love these effects, so I hope he's good because this design is right up my alley. But is he? Again, combat isn't relevant anymore, right? So I don't know. How do you see old Tulian here?
I think I like Tulian if he's like the second warrior that I'm playing off of Tyvis, I think. Because, you know, you're going to play Tyvis, search a warrior, play the warrior, and then that's going to be like your first play of the game. Mm-hmm. So if I'm playing Tulian, I'm never going to be able to like trigger his... I'm probably not going to be able to trigger his ability the turn that I play him unless I already have an established board, and that makes it a little less playable than some of the other options. Like Axstar, obviously just like boom, sick. Obviously just great out of the stables, you know. So I'm pretty on board for Axstar and stuff like that. When he's coming out of Tyvis, but again, yeah, the Tulian is kind of the second card coming out of Tyvis a lot of the time, and I think in those situations, it's a lot less potent. It's more likely that this is an off-color card, which means we probably play fewer of him, and you're not going to want to be searching him off the Tyvis because he's your second play. Obviously, you're going to want to search your first play a lot of the time, so I don't know. I think this card is less likely to succeed than Tyvis individually, and that kind of makes me sad because I also agree that this card. I really like the Earth Cloud, the Legend Cloud.
Yeah.
That card is like so cool, I think, and I like having more of these force block situations, but I unfortunately would not be surprised if this is one of the cards that is less likely to succeed in Warriors than the other ones that you mentioned.
No, that I love that breakdown that you don't want to play this guy first off of Tyvis. Fingers crossed for him. But now we have Stone Serpent General Zar Zazarg. As far as all these like generals go from 11, this one is probably my favorite just because I like that it's if he takes any damage from a summoner ability, it doesn't matter how much. Like, it'd be very uninspiring if he just like returned whatever he took, but nope, he just hits you for 8k. So you ping him for 1, he hits you for 8k. Now that being said, your opponent knows that, so I can't see a world where they're like, blah, send a bunch of 2k attacks at you, and he just, blah, and he nukes down their board. Of course, that's the dream. You know, that's what made Dadaluma so strong, is that you controlled when you did the damage. Like,
right, yeah.
So, mini Dadaluma, he's definitely not. Probably won't see play, but all of these, like, chonky generals, I actually like. I like the idea, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like a little, I guess I would call him Dadaluma at home, you know, a little Dadaluma, like Azul, people were saying was going to be better than Dadaluma. I don't know if you remember that, but, yeah, kind of Dadaluma at home kind of thing. I think this is probably the worst looking out of the generals, which is kind of sad but it's still, you know, very, very playable and limited, I think, and potentially playable in L3 if Mono Earth is something you're potentially considering. Being said, yeah, I have a hard time. If there was like some kind of aggro deck that existed and they had to incidentally deal damage to your forward or something, then I would be pretty tempted. If this worked really well against, you know, like 13, I would be pretty tempted to play this card. But it doesn't really work around any of those things. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of, I don't know. If it triggered when it was chosen too, I would be way, way higher on it because there's so many cards that force you to choose. But it doesn't trigger off of combat damage. It doesn't trigger off of choosing. And so I think it's just a little too narrow to say playing standard.
My favorite artist in Final Fantasy, Yoshitaka Amano, brings us our next Earth Legend, Neo X Death, which is the monster hate we all need, but is it the one we deserve? So this card is unequivocally great just for the fact that it does something unique. And when a card does something unique, it always at least is worthy of attention. There is nothing else in the game that just blanket removes the monsters from the board. And this one doesn't even hit your own. It's like you could be playing a monster deck, play this guy, and he's just going to wipe out your forwards, your opponent's monsters. Now, I keep saying the word monsters because we have other stuff that wipes our opponent's forwards. We have Shinryu, we have Shantoto, etc. So I specifically see him for the monsters because the monsters were the things that, like, it feels awful to Shantoto a board with 1 forward and 8 monsters. That doesn't do anything. I've seen this guy in action. I've played him myself for the purposes of getting rid of monsters. Again, he's great just because there's nothing else like it. However, man, it's expensive. 8 and you lose 2 backups. Someone did this to me. I was playing Scions, and he dumped his hand to Neo X Death. There went all my Scions, and next turn is like, okay, Grahatia, Alice, Y'shtola, kill it. Like, just rebuilt the board out of nowhere. Like, the game is so fast now, and stuff is so cheap that, like, beyond the monsters, I don't like him at all. I think he's just far, far too expensive. But for those monster games, I mean, I feel like he's essential. How do you see Neo X Death?
Yeah, I more or less agree with the assessment. I think for the job of hating monsters, this card is irreplaceable. Like, there's nothing like it. You know, Sin isn't even like it. It just straight up removes them. You know, you have the 3 zombies on the board. You have no zombies for the rest of the game. They're gone. You know, like it is very, very good at combating, you know, Mira. It doesn't break them. You know, it's very important. That being said, I have heard there's been so much discussion, probably more than any other card in the entire set. There's been more arguments about this card. I think is very much one of the most decisive. I think this card is wildly overrated. I think so many people are just like, oh my god, this is like Shantoto, and I'm like, no. It's like nothing like Shantoto. Like, Shantoto gives you a backup. This guy like removes 2 backups. Like, people are like way underrating how much tempo you lose when you have to remove 2 of your own backups. Like, that is like game altering. Like, you set yourself back like 3 turns playing this guy, and sometimes that is worth it. People are saying that like this is just like the best, you know, board clear at this point. And I was like, no, like, it isn't even a board clear against 13. It doesn't work at all against that deck, you know? Like, it doesn't work against 13 at all. It doesn't work against like the turn 2 kills from Xenos. Like, it just doesn't do anything versus those. I think very specifically against monsters and against like in these very, very long grindy control mirrors is really where this card shines. I think if the 2 of you are playing, you know, like Ice Earth mirrors or like Earth Lightning mirrors, and you have like these really dingy boards full of like monsters and weenies, and like nobody gets to attack or do anything, playing a Neo X Death and removing your 2 backups is 1, less of a liability, and 2, way better at pushing a huge chunk of damage because, you know, there's no like there were board clears you could like heck 5, and then your opponent would still have, you know, like Biblos to block and like threaten a backswing, and you don't actually get to push that much damage, or, you know, like you're still going to discard a Scale Toad and stuff like that. But when you X-Death really just swings the entire board, it's very, very easy to just suddenly push, you know, like 2, 3, 4 points of damage over like 1 to 2 turns. And I think in that like very specific situation, this card is irreplaceable. It's just like really, really good at doing specifically that for control mirrors. I think, like, again, to reiterate, against, you know, 13, against like 14, against Scions, this card is just garbage. It's like so awful. I think this card is way worse at clearing the board than people think. That being said, again, in those grindy control mirrors against monsters like that, this card is very, very useful to have as one of in your deck.
Yep. Well said, sir. Well said. On to the next warrior. We have Have. I'm not 100% sure what he says. Have. I'll just say Have. So a lot of field effects. You can gain... Job warriors will gain can't be broken by summons or abilities, don't deal damage, and powers opponent controls cannot be increased. Which is, like, none of that text is super exciting. Yeah. I've always liked the whole, hey, you only have to break me through damage. I don't know how relevant that is nowadays. In some ways, I think it's more relevant because lightning has gotten more and more straight break effects. But in other ways, I don't know. It doesn't seem relevant. Again, haven't tested it. So he's just a big body. He doesn't really give his value back. You can't play him for free off of Tyvis. He obviously then can become the 10k Brave. Like, I don't know. Paying 5 for something that, again, against the right deck, if they're playing Lightning, if they're playing, hey, you're going to shut them down with this. Oh, well, crap, I can't do anything now. But if they don't care about that, you're going to invest 5 in absolutely nothing. So, yeah, maybe he's one of the ones you just play less of. And again, if it's, he's going to be that silver bullet in this deck, maybe that's when you bring him out. Because I was kind of high on him when I first read him, but the more I think about him, I'm like, what does this guy really do?
Yeah. I think the bottom line is I don't have any problems with any of his text. You know, like the not being able to be broken by like it's the edel text, right? The like having the kind of edel text for warriors. Yeah, that seems useful. I think the card is just too expensive to justify, you know, the kind of lack of board impact that it really has at any given point in time. I think if the card is likely to succeed, I think it's more likely to succeed in like L3, where board clears are harder to come by, and the ones that do exist are like the Goddess, which do breaks. So obviously this card is going to be good against that. You know, I think against specifically stuff like that in L3, where the kind of available options for board clears and removal is it's much narrower than in standard. This card is more likely to succeed. That being said, it's still not, you know, it's still just like a 5 CP 9K a lot of the time, and I think that is just going to be a detriment of the card going forward.
Yep. Speaking of black belts, we've got White Tiger Lassie King Me here. He actually has really nice full art. I like this full art. And what I do like is that it's anytime she's chosen by summoner ability. So you could like hit her with your own Belias and then she gets an extra buff. But it's just power. And again, we've mentioned that before. Power on its own is if she drew a card, if she dulled a forward, if she, you know, sent something back into the EX burst, I don't know. Like, just if she did anything else, I'd be willing. But as far as I see her, she's basically just a black belt with a little spice.
Yeah, this is the most wasted good Roberta Ferrari art that I've ever seen. So,
that's a shame. There's the monk backup. We talked about all those crystal ones. Ram. So I'll kind of echo my Onion Knight thoughts. Clearly someone thinks power is still very relevant, because otherwise why would he enter dull? Why would he freeze himself if you actually use his ability? I mean, I like combat tricks. I really do, but you want me to pay 2 for something that has to wait a whole turn, and then I've got to pay another 1 every time I want to use it. But when I use it, I then can't repeat it? Like, I don't know. I'm sure it's great and limited where you can kind of just threaten it. Someone else mentioned that like, well, technically you'll never even really need to use the ram if you just have the threat of the ram. But like, surely there's better things we can be doing with a slot than this guy. How do you see him?
I think, okay, hear me out.
Oh, okay.
I hate this card. I think that this card is awful. And I think it might still just be better than your average Earth monster.
Oh, damn.
So I think that this card is awful, but I think that Earth monsters are just so bad that, like, you know, we've been playing cards like Behemoth and, you know, like these just like total like Gigas FFCC, you know, like these total wastes of slot cards that potentially, if you have, you know, Mira and this whole host of I must play Earth monsters, just like ignore Leo splashing stuff, you know, ignore all that. You have to play 14 Earth monsters or whatever it is that you've arbitrarily decided is your appropriate hit rate for Mira. Maybe this card is just good enough. Like that, it is good enough because it's an Earth monster that stays on the board, so it reduces the cost of your Montleonis, which is something that is really important that like a lot of the other Earth monsters just don't do. You know, like the Gigas or whatever, you lose it eventually. The Mandragora or whatever, you lose it eventually. But this card stays on the board. Maybe it's just barely good enough in that specific mono Earth monster deck to be worth slotting. And yeah, it is really slow, and it really sucks that it comes in dull, and it really sucks that it doesn't activate. But I could potentially see, you know, like, hey, I have this zombie. If you want to make me use my Mira on the zombie, I'm gonna ram it, and you're gonna kill it. You're gonna have to kill your own dude. You know, like that is something. You know, that is definitely something that speaks for the card, is having this kind of ability to have this unbreakable 9K Giga Chad, just, you know, just like hanging out there. And maybe there's something there. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess we'll find out. Here we have Lich. This is one of our Chaoses. I actually got to see this when my buddy's been testing with all the Mono Earth stuff this set, so I got to see this a lot. 7, it was kind of weird because 7 could be quite difficult to hit. It felt like he was either already dead at that point before he ever got enough to make that relevant, or he was winning so well at that point that it kind of didn't matter. So I felt like the whole 7 cost text or 7 character text never really came up. I do like the entry effect just because, especially if you play this main phase 2, it basically reads enter the field, break that thing, which is really nice.
Yeah.
I do love that as a revival, he comes back active. So if you're playing Earth stuff, I definitely think he's worth trying, but he also... I thought he read a lot better than actually seeing him play, and I was like, I don't know, he's just kind of okay, so...
Yeah, I think this card is potentially, like Ram that I was just talking about, it's not a particularly good card, but it does kind of just synergize well enough with the monster stuff that if you're playing it, maybe you just jam one of it in there. You know, it's not particular, it's never going to shine super well, but he's a Montleonis target, and then sometimes he has his own thing, so like that's probably just good enough some of the time that, like, we were playing, you know, Ignis, and that breaks like your own backup and stuff like that. And that wasn't really like a good solution to what we were doing. But we were playing that just because it was a Montleonis target that could break something that your opponent controls, and that is relevant. So I think if I was going to try a new Mono Earth monster deck, this set, I would be tempted to play one Lich just to see how it works out.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll end Earth with Mr. Little Runda here. I'm kind of surprised this doesn't break itself. Like, there's a lot of cards with effects like these, but they break themselves. No, this is repeatable, and he's just a 2-cost. So this seems kind of like a nice step forward. I don't think he's searchable. I don't think mech matters, and I can't recall it. Yeah, there's nothing that searches FFBE backups. But it's a nice little threat that any forward, again, no restrictions, and it just says any damage dealt by summons or abilities, reduce it by 3. Obviously really good against something like fire, maybe not so much against lightning or water, so maybe, and fire I feel like has been falling off these days, so perhaps his uses are limited, but especially since he's just a 2-cost, I will happily at least run one of these, and when I have those turns, when I get to leave a CP up, be like, all right, well, I'll just threaten to run to protect it. It works in combat, or no, it doesn't work in combat. It's just summon durability.
No, summon durability.
That would have made it quite nice if it worked in combat. So, yeah, he's fine.
That would be good.
How you see him?
Yeah, this strikes me as, like, it has the kind of, like, wording in the situation that, like, are they going to make this like a searchable backup in the future? It kind of feels like they might. It kind of has the Lael feel to it, you know, like where it's like, it's just an okay card, but like if there's like a Norstallin for this, then all of a sudden we're a lot more interested in playing it, right? And it becomes one of the better choices. Maybe there's, you know, some kind of like engineer backup that searches a mech when it enters the field. I don't know if there's got to be a character that fits, you know, like, so I could potentially see that being something for the card going forward. Right now, not high enough impact to really justify just like jamming a bunch of these. Like, it's never going to be as good as your other Earth options outside of L3, where you will probably play this card just because it's solid there. But yeah, in Standard, probably not going to see play unless it becomes searchable.
Yep, good point. All right, that'll do it for Earth, so let's move on to Lightning. Starting off strong with a Lightning Legend. We have a beautiful full art Irvine here. Character I always had a soft spot for an 8. Never got a great amount of card love in the game, so I'm happy to see him here. Yeah, I've gotten to test this guy quite a bit, and he's just really solid. He's kind of like a better Alba. I always really liked that Opus 12 Alba, but it could be really awkward sometimes because they had to discard a summon in order to trigger her haste. And a lot of times I just wouldn't do that early, whereas Irvine hits characters, which is way more common, so I've had no issues just playing him. He immediately removes 2, gives himself 2k haste first strike, which means he's going to get to attack again and become an 11k first strike for that first turn. He's really solid. I've never had the special come up, but the idea that it can hit monsters is really good. That being said, I don't want to say I was underwhelmed by him because he didn't do anything wrong, but he just, and maybe it was just the matches I played him in, he just died every time he would go in, he'd get his one attack off, and then he would just be dead on the next turn. So, you know, and ultimately it was kind of like, what is this guy really doing for me? Again, really good when I'm eating up their break zone, but it's very, I guess it's very telegraphed, right? It's not like the Edward Ice backup where in response to something I can boom rip something out of your break zone. It's very limited to my to my turn and my phase. So I don't want to say there's anything wrong with him because I do really like him, but when I first read him and saw him, I was like, this card's going to be amazing. And then when I played it, I was like, oh, yeah, he's fine.
Yeah, that basically lines up with my experience. I guess the way that I would describe Irvine is just, he's just like a really annoying little dude, you know. It's not like he's like out there as like this massive threat that's going to like solo the game or whatever. But yeah, he just like, it's a lot. It does remind me a lot like Alba, and I think that comparison kind of draws itself. You know, he comes in, you can't really stop the 1 point damage a lot of the time. It's just they're not going to play it if you can. So you know, he just kind of always gets in his little point of damage, or if he doesn't, then he's just a really sad card in his hand. And I think the thing that really separates this card from other cards that are like it is the S ability. The S ability is obviously really, really good. So I think specifically in decks like Earth Lightning, like you might consider this, especially because that deck was kind of low on lightning forwards that it wanted to play. There's really not, it's just Man in Black. Like the other ones are just kind of whatever. But so yeah, it when you can recycle it with Kusith, it is obviously a really nice and versatile ability. You know, like it gives you the ability, your lightning deck or whatever, the ability to kill Scale Toad, which is like not something that it could really do very easily before it. And again, there is that Odin that came out this same set, and it's kind of been that the S ability is kind of outshone by that card in a lot of ways. But I have found that like if I do play it, I am the happiest when I can hold and or resolve one S ability, and when I can't, it's just kind of like a meh. It's kind of a whatever card. There's I like the way you put it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just like, you know, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we have the Red Mage. Those are those crystal backups. Let's scoot past that to the poster boy of Class 0 Cadets. Okay, I'm very curious to know what you think about this card, because some people have just been going gaga over this card. Like, oh my god, that ace is so good. He's so strong. And I'm like... And I keep rereading it. And I'm like, well, I mean, he draws a card, and that's good, but that's not like a new thing. Like, am I missing something here? Like, I have some of my friends trying to tell me, dude, this is just one of the strongest cards I've ever seen. I'm like, really? It just draws a card? Like, again, for Cadets, it comes online very easily. You will very likely draw an entry, draw if he can continue to attack, and his action ability is fine. I don't know, paying 2 CP for a dull and a 1k bump is I guess that doesn't sound insane to me. I'm not saying it's bad, and I'd rather have it than not have it, but again, I don't see a scenario where my opponent like attacks with an 8k, I block with ace, discard, dull another thing, and bump, and they go, oh man, I didn't know that was gonna happen. Like, it's right there. So and ace always has the strongest cards in Cadets anyway. Like the Fire Legend, it rarely do you ever get to remove anything with the attack, but the on entry like Reveal 7 is still quite good. There's nothing wrong with this card. I was just surprised by how many people thought this thing was amazing. It's like, it's solid, but like, I don't think this is saving Cadets. I don't know. Am I undervaluing him? How do you see Ace?
Well, I do think this is the best Ace that we have. Like, by a long shot, I think it's not even close. This card is very much like, if this wasn't so limited by how bad job Class 0 Cadet is, this card would definitely be like one of the strongest cards in the set, I think. I think the effect is really, really good. I think it works really, really well with Regagine, who we're going to get the light card that we're going to get to in a little bit, you know, because you can immediately turn on. There's something about this creates card advantage when it enters the field or attacks is just really good. A lot of the times, you know, those kinds of cards, like, it's like Rufus, but it's like the opposite. You get to draw instead of make your opponent discard. And when you think about it that way, it kind of makes more sense, I think, right? You know, like, if Rufus was just an 8k, like, I think way more people would be on that. There's a reason he's a 7k, you know, stuff like that. And in a lot of similar ways, you know, a lot of the cards that do, like Man in Black, it kind of draws a card on entry and on attack. That has to be a 5-drop, because it's just like, those kinds of effects are really powerful. I think that this ace is really powerful, and when I've played... I must confess, I have not played a lot with him myself. When he's been played against me, he's been like the best card in whatever deck that is coming. It's just like the supporting cast is so bad that it just doesn't really matter. You know, like the Cadets are just so poor that I don't think it really matters. I would be a lot happier to like play a Class 0 Cadet package in Mono Lightning than I would be to play Cadets. If there was just like, because Trey and Ace, and we're gonna get to Trey a little bit too. Trey and Ace, they're good, solid cards with like nothing to build around them, and you can't just play like the 6 of them. It just doesn't work. It's not feasible, you know. So I think that the action ability is a little bit better than you would expect. I think the one thing that really, you know, comes to mind with this thing is it is quite good. The action ability is quite good against like 13 and stuff like that. You know, like the ability to pump yourself to 9k after an attack. So like if they do Vanilla Hope and then they play Lightning, you can just before combat pitch a card, dull the Hope, and then they can't attack in with the Vanilla or the Lightning because you have a 9K blocker versus the 8K attack or whatever it's going to be. So I mean, it's not like incredible, but I think it is a very soft-spoken action ability that is actually pretty useful when you consider that it's coming on such a light body. So yeah, I think that this card is really good. I would be really hyped to see where this card goes. Like again, it's like the curse with Cadets. I want to see where this goes in future sets. You know,
Yeah.
like I think right now we have like a good Trey and a good Ace that work, and just like a Lightning Shell. And we just need like another 2 cards, I guess. And then you could maybe see, you know, the Class 0 Cadet package in a Mono Lightning or something like that, instead of just, you know, playing a bunch of mediocre cards to try to make these good cards work well.
Yeah. Interesting. The way you phrased it that way is like, and you were so high on him compared to me. I wonder if my anger is more towards the Ace, or like you said, but I'm forced to play him in this package of cards that just aren't enjoyable to play. So.
Yeah.
Very good. I'll keep working with him. So next we have a card I was so hyped for. I love this Amano art. I keep wanting to say this is from Final Fantasy VI. It's actually a Category 3 card. This is Odin.
Yeah.
A little bit of a mono lightning payoff. What I like about this most of all is that it hits monsters. If it just hit forwards, I don't think I'd be as high on it, but hitting monsters again is more and more relevant as time goes on. And then you get to draw a card, so it's kind of like Brynhildr. That being said, the draw refund at times is I've had a few times where it was hard to hit. Sometimes not at all, because sometimes you can ramp out really quick with lightning. But there's a few times, like I said, they go aggro at 13. I'm like, oh crap, I need to use this now. I don't even have 5 lightning characters yet, so I guess I'm just paying the full 3. And paying the full 3, it does feel a little expensive compared to like the 2 of a Brynhildr. But nonetheless, I still really like the card. I've been happy with the testing with it. And yeah, I think it's a good lightning summon.
Yeah, I think they trolled us pretty well in L3 to finally give us an Odin after the multi-lightning dropped out of rotation. So the mission success by Hobby Japan there. But yeah, good. It's a really good card. It's not. I don't think anybody's surprised. I thought that maybe it would be a bit stricter of, you know, like a you must be this high to pass the to ride this ride kind of card in the format. I still think it's pretty easy to just like, I mean, if you play like I had experiences playing like Rufus Rugagine turn 1, and like yeah, they Odin the Rugagine, but like I still got them to discard, and then they paid. It was like we both just discarded 3 cards. You know, it's not like completely going to oppress aggro out of the format. I don't think. I think you're definitely right. Like 13 can definitely play through this card. Other aggro decks can play through this card, so I don't think it's like single-handedly going to crush forward-based strategies, but it is a good option that, you know, Earth Lightning and Mono Lightning and maybe even Ice Lightning at this point now we'll be looking to use, even if they can't necessarily utilize the draw text. I still think that the card is maybe just just good enough as a 3 CP summon that you would be tempted to play this.
Nice. Next, we have Emperor Gestalt. He doesn't have a ton of cards. Can fit in the 6 package, especially if you're playing Stooges. Now you technically have a way, quote-unquote, to help you put out the Lightning Stooge. I think it's Mobius. Other than that, for his effects on his own, I mean, they're fine. Like, I like that it's a 2 CP that if you really wanted a forward back, you could discard, essentially swap a card to get it back. But you don't have to. You can just play the 2. And then his Break Zone effect, I've seen someone use it already, and it was nice. It was a nice little, oh, you were going to revive that, actually eat those cards, and then I'm going to draw off of it. He doesn't really do anything new or, like, you know, particularly we've never seen before, but for what he does, he's fine. I think he's solid.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty good one. There's this whole push, and I forgot to mention it with the Ace as well, but this big push in Lightning towards just like giving you discard outlets, because before the only element that really had discard outlets in the entire game was water. You know, you had Moogle and Poo-Poo and all of those pseudo effects, and I think they are kind of pushing to give us another element that has all these discard outlets, and that kind of makes it easier to play Lightning with, you know, lots of light and dark cards, or like lots of dead cards that kind of like translate into other options. And I think this is just another example of that push towards these kinds of effects. You know, we had like Chadley, you know, Aricia Alricia, which is a really, really old card, but it does discard, you know, like Arc or whatever if you need to. yeah, there's a lot of these cards that are kind of pushing towards just like, instead of paying 2 or being costed 2 more, discard a card on entry to do this thing. I think there's a really, really nice utility backup that falls into that archetype. The action ability is a little stricter than I had thought it was going to be. You know, like, having to choose exactly 4 is a lot worse than choosing up to 4.
Yeah.
Like, it is a lot worse than choosing up to 4, because it kind of reduces the timing that you're able to do these. And a lot of times, especially when you're playing cards like Irvine, you're kind of eating their break zone a little bit at a time, and you end up not having 4 of the same type. You know, you'll have like 2 summons, 2 backups, and you know, 3 forwards or whatever, and you're like, well, I have to eat something because they're going to Kusa the forward back, but then I'm not actually going to get the draw.
Yeah.
It's something that came up like a lot of the time. And I think a lot of people just thought, like, if you remove 4 cards, just draw a card. It's like, no. There's like an extra line of text on that requires something else to get the draw card. So, yeah, it is a little stricter than I think it seems on first glance. You might not think that, like, 4 of the same type is really that big of a hurdle to climb, but it actually really is. So, yeah, it's a good card. It's leaves a little bit more to be desired, but it's still just good enough that I think you'll see it played at 1 or 2 of in most Mono Lightning builds.
Yeah, very fair. Next, we have the tank class. I'm currently leveling on 14. This is Gunbreaker, but this card is terrible. Like, you have to wait to attack and invest a crystal all to get a 4K cleave. 4K. I couldn't believe it's 2K and then another. Like, that's it. Would it have been too strong to be a 4-4 or 3-3? Maybe they didn't want it to compete with the Legend Fire Squall from 5 sets ago now. I don't know, but just all that just for a 4K cleave. I'm not feeling that.
Yeah, this one's pretty bad.
Well, it sounds like you want some.
Doesn't even make its own crystal.
Right? Yeah. Sounds like you want some more bad 14 cards. So here's Machinist that still, someone out there is still living the dream of the damaged forward. That whole idea. Yeah. Another one this is pretty forgettable. Any thoughts?
No.
Fair enough. Move on to the next one. This is my spoiler. This is Gilgamesh. So they have tried this card's ever since I got this, I knew I wanted to bring this up with you. This is card number 3981 in Lightning of, hey, it attacks multiple times. And we've seen them try this idea, and none of them have ever really taken off. Behemoth King K was kind of popular. Astinian, even from last set, Astinian, even with his cheap warp, he was one of the first scions to get cut from those lists.
Yeah.
Maybe just because combat isn't as relevant these days, like they keep trying to make this this double attack effect, and it's just, I've yet to see one that I'm like, wow, that's the card. It hits you so much. And would it have been crazy that he makes the crystal on entry? Like, would that have really been too powerful if he enters, he gives himself the crystal, and he can immediately use it? I don't personally think so. Maybe it would have been. So I really don't like that he has to die first to get the crystal, so you have to have a crystal from somewhere else. It's, again, I don't know. They keep trying to make this effect. So whatever else you say about Gilgamesh, Jared, tell me, why isn't that effect sticking? Why isn't that effect, like, being the success they want it to be?
I think they're very hesitant to make that effect on a card that can just immediately do it. Because, you'll notice with, like, Estinian or Furion, like, either a lot of these cards that can attack multiple times cannot give themselves haste, or cannot, give themselves brave. Like, Ravana is an example of that. Or they just don't have an inherent haste. So there's, like Estinian gets his effect when he warps. You have to telegraph it pretty hard when you're trying to work for these. And I think that's because if you just, like, for example, on this card, if they just had it ETB, get his own crystal, and then you use his own crystal, as a result, you're not going to see, like, a bunch of, like, fair decks playing these as damage pushers. You're just going to see people, like, jam the 3 of this in 13. Like, that's the end result that you're looking at, is just, like, a deck that just never plays fair and is just trying to push in damage as quickly as possible. And I think that's not a direction that they're very interested in. taking it. So we're gonna get to this in a little bit, and I'll talk about it maybe a little bit more then. But like Furion, for example, is maybe the cheapest and greatest double attacker that we've gotten so far. But it requires your opponent to have 4 dual characters. You'll notice that just does not work in the 13 formula because your opponent is never supposed to get to 4 characters, and let alone have them be dull in the first place. So I think they're trying to give each of these cards a place where they kind of get to strike the balance between being fair enough that you get to play turns in the game of Final Fantasy and still be potent damage test. And I think Astinian is probably the best one that we've gotten so far. And then this Gilgamesh is a little bit, you have to do the setup beforehand.
Yeah.
But I think this one is a lot quicker and less telegraphed than Astinian. Like I will, if I'm at 4 damage or whatever, every time my opponent has 1 forward that I might not be able to block, or something, I have to think about whether that forward plus Gilgamesh is going to kill me. And I think that is something to be spoken for. I thought this card was like really bad when I first saw it, and I think it's a lot better now that I've had some time to play against it. I think the damage threat is really scary. It's just so bad unless you're literally going to kill your opponent with it that I'm not really sure how to evaluate it.
That's great insight, and that'll come up again when we talk about the Furion. So very well said. Thank you. Yeah. Here we have Queen, who I was excited for when I saw her, just because it was like, oh wow, this is the first Queen we've had since Opus 3.
The starter deck.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's insane. And I tested her. She just feels so over designed. Like she only has really effects when she's in the middle of attacking. That then also it doesn't even last till the end of the turn. It fades once she's done attacking. So like,
right.
And I mean, you can pay 2 lightning to get 2k power, and it's only if you control enough cadets. Like, why are there so many restrictions on that? Like, I played her. I mean, she's fine. She's, I guess, better than the old Queens, but you're talking about stuff that came out 18 sets ago, so that's not saying much. Like, I'm just so underwhelmed by... She's like the Wind Machina. Like, she just feels so generic, and I don't feel like she's doing anything for the deck that like, oh, good, Queen now solves problem X. So I was very underwhelmed by her.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's nothing like wrong with the card. It's just like, well, it's an on-curve forward that puts in a point of damage. Like, I would have been maybe more excited to play this card if it kind of had the Lux Celeste kind of like thing going on. Whereas like if you have Lock and Celeste, the Celeste gives Lock haste too, and they both get haste. If this like gave Ace haste as well, I would be a lot more excited to play this. But it's just like, yeah, that would be great. I would be really excited for that. But like it just has haste itself, and it's good at putting in damage. Like it's very difficult to block the card, and I think that's like exactly what they were going for with it. But like, is that a useful effect in Mono Lightning? Well, I mean, like, not really. You kind of have, like, a lot of ways to get rid of the blockers in the first place, You have a lot of ways to give haste to the cards that you want to give haste to. So, like, is this as a standalone card, like, really that impressive? No. It feels like Alua from Opus 5, but, like, 15 sets later and, like, way too late to make a difference, so...
All right. Next, we have Cloud from World of Final Fantasy. Was pretty excited to try this guy. I've tried him multiple times in my Fire Ice Waff build, and he's nice. He kind of fills a little niche spot. I can't say that word all of a sudden. That Rain wants you to go to combat and then ping out with a bunch of guys. Well, sometimes at the start of combat they're gonna blank the Rain or they'll do something so where she doesn't work. Whereas Cloud just immediately says nope. Get that off the field. He's been really nice in testing, especially because you can play the Rain. She doesn't create a stack, so then you can immediately play the Cloud without them being able to interact with her and pretty much just break anything you want on their field forward-wise. And as forwards have gotten cheaper over time, he's going to have more and more targets. So he's been really solid. I will say there are a few awkward times. Like I remember there's one time I had 4 World of Final Fantasy characters. So... Rain wasn't quite free, she was 1, and so I kind of wanted to play Cloud first to make the Rain free, but I couldn't pay for the Cloud without the Rain because I needed her to color fix, so there were a few times him being Lightning was kind of like, oh crap, I don't have the Rain or the Lawn, like I can't actually use the card, so that is a bit of a big knock against him, but if you're willing to put up with that, he's quite good. What do you think? Yeah,
no, that basically lines up with my assessment of it. I think might take this moment to talk about like how I feel about WoF as a whole, and that like the individual WoF cards, they all read really, really well. The problem, and you know, we have a great rain, and we have all of this like infrastructure, I guess, that kind of makes the WoF deck in Fire Ice look really good on paper. And then you kind of start building it, and then you realize that like all of the lands really suck. Like, and they want you to, it wants you to like have other cards on the board before you play the land, or like the land is just like really, really outdated, like the Opus 1/1 or whatever. But you really need to play land for like the cloud to actually become free, and like, you know, or for your backup loose to become cheaper, or for you to have EX versus targets. And it's just like, it doesn't feel like there's a correct order to actually put the cards onto the table once you have the cards in your hand. You know, like it feels very intuitive to play the girl who forgot her name and then attack with snow, and then you like untap and you're like playing your backups, and then when it actually comes time to like start playing your next round of forwards, it's just not immediately clear like what order they're supposed to go on the table in, and like how you actually get to the fifth one so the rain becomes free so that you can play the cloud. And like you really need to, the draw really needs to line up for it to feel like it is actually doing anything. And that was my big gripe. That being said, that's not really a knock against this cloud in particular. That's more of a problem with LAN and the WoF deck as a whole.
Yeah,
this card individually is really, really good for that deck, and obviously you're gonna play it regardless of the element. Like, it's just like kind of a give. It's like a light and dark card that you can discard for CP. That's about it. So yeah,
that's a good comparison. Now I'm glad you touched on the set, because I was thinking that too. And being in Fire Ice, I definitely noticed the lack of draw sometimes, where I'm just like, well, I've played everything out, and I'm just trying to like recoup, draw back to my engines.
No draw, and you can't really recur the rain except for like with 4 CP Shantoto, but like you don't really have direct discard, so it doesn't really work very well in that regard, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely got some hiccups. I wonder if this next one has hiccups. This is Black Knight. I've gotten to test him out. I really like that they've put a lot of forward and monster on a lot of these cards. I think they realized, I've always wondered, especially between like Opus 16 to 18, 19-ish, that there are so many cards that I felt should have hit monsters, but I could tell they were scared to like, well, we don't want it to say character because now suddenly it hits backups, but it needs to hit forwards or monsters, so I'm glad to see them start doing that. The reason I like this guy, he doesn't technically do anything like super unique. There's so many lightning cards that break a 2-cost forward, again, other than he hits monsters. But I also kind of like that, well, he can then spend himself later. 5 is very expensive, but again, I see it as that emergency. I'm going to die. I got to pay 5, have the Black Knight break whatever it is that's threatening me. That being said, man, the monsters that can become forwards are so good and so strong. I don't know if it's worth it to lose one of those, like the Thunder Drake, whatever, from one of these guys. So I do like him. I like his art, but is he worth it over those ones that can become forwards? That I'm not sure of.
Yeah, I like the card in general. I think it is really good that, like you said, it hits forwards and monsters. There is a pretty big I've considered playing in some Mira builds that play lightning cards, or like just like Earth Lightning Mira in general. The old dragon from like Opus 4, just because there was really no options to hit monsters. So I think this is just like a strict upgrade for those sorts of things. You know, like however, in like Earth Water monsters, where you're kind of like playing some off-element splash monsters, I don't really think he works as well as Thunder Drake. I think that seemed pretty clear to me right off the bat. Actually, is that like I tried splashing this because I thought maybe it would just be an upgrade to Thunder Drake, and I was just like, oh, I'm never using the action ability. Like, it's just like, it's impossible to create 2 lightning. It's just a little bit too expensive. I would have been a lot more interested in if it was like 1 lightning and 4 generic. You know, I think that would have been a lot better for those kinds of decks. That being said, it is still good, especially, you know, with the printing of Gao and stuff like that, to just have these monsters that stick around in any capacity. So is it better than Thunder Drake for like some of the off-color splashes? Like, well, how important is killing monsters? That's really what it's going to come down to, I think. But I think a lot of the times you're right. The forward body on Thunder Drake, that whole cycle of monsters is just like so good compared to other monsters, and I think even Hobby Japan is probably a little surprised at how good those monsters are compared to that. Like, I think they're a lot better than they intended them to be. So otherwise they might have made them like 5Ks or
Yeah.
so that they like die to Warrior of Light or stuff like that. But instead they're just very very good cards. So I don't think it's a knock that this card is a little bit probably worse than Thunderdrake in some situations, as long as it's covering a niche that you otherwise really really wanted to cover. So I think if you're concerned about the Hippocampus deck or about Earth Lightning or about like Earth Water monsters or like Mono Earth monsters and stuff like that, it's very easy and very low cost to just jam a couple of these in your Mono Lightning deck alongside your Odins if you want to, and make good use of these. It is also notable that Alphanod can't really search any in Mono Lightning Silence specifically. Alphanod can't search like Odin or whatever because it's not a character, but it can search this. So it is pretty easy to jam just one of these or just two of these so that your Alphanod can emergency kill Rydia and also potentially hit monsters and stuff like that.
Yeah, good point. Love the Alphano point. Next we have Man in Black. I love the text on this card. I've always liked the tax theme. I've always liked the what will you do XYZ. That being said, I don't think this card's any good. One, it has awful name clash because Lightning Man in Black is just one of the strongest cards we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's oddly similar to it, because that one also messed with your ability to be able to attack and block, except that one didn't give your opponent the choice. It just said, yeah, you're not doing that. So it almost feels like this one should have come out first, and then the other one is like the successor to this. I don't know. I like the effect, but again, any card that gives your opponent an option on what to do. Like, if they don't need to pay it, they're not going to pay it. And if they need to pay it, they will pay it. So I like the idea. I like the design, especially compared to his predecessor. I'll be amazed if this sees any play.
Okay, I'm going to be a little contrarian here. And I'm going to say, I think that this card is deceptively good. I don't think it's... I think you're totally right that, like, the name clash is obviously the worst thing about the card. And it might never see play, but I think the design behind this card and the place that I see it is like decks like 13. They just like can't kill it. They have to like Ahmad it or whatever. So like it is really really good against hyper aggressive strategies. So like you cannot just afford to pay the tax on this like like more than a turn or two. It's just not feasible because you probably don't have a backup. It is really, really good at stopping these hyper-aggressive strategies. I think, any deck that's like going turn one Regagine with Rufus or, like whatever partner he potentially has, like Man in Black is just really good at stopping that. And that is maybe less potent in like a Swiss tournament environment when you're playing like 8 rounds of Swiss against a bunch of unknown. You never know what you're going to play against. It is less potent. However, like if you're playing like in a invitational, like you're playing at nationals, you're playing at worlds, or you're playing at a relatively smaller event, and you kind of know after a round or two what people are on before you play against them. It is very potent to like keep this against hyper aggro, I think, and I think that is kind of the purpose behind this card. It's not supposed to be just like generically good. It's not supposed to be a card that you just like splash any deck. It has one specific job, and it is really, really good at that specific job. And I think that's where they kind of intend for this card to go.
Nice.
Is that good enough for it to see play? I don't know. That only time will tell on that. But it is definitely an option, and it's nice that you can search it off Sid Polendina and stuff like that. So comes in off of Cecil too. So there's options that we saw that like category 4 wall deck kind of going on last set. I'm not convinced that you would, but you definitely could play one of it in there because you can always search for it off of St. Polendina and Cecil's going to bring it in. So,
yeah. Wow, you made a really good case for that. That is a very strong anti-aggro card. Would be great if we ever got a sideboard that you can just keep one of those in the...
Yeah, that would be great.
Really fast and slap them in. Well, next we have our other Lightning Legend, Zandi. I was so excited for this card when I saw it. Also, I kind of just appreciated how just straightforward it was. It's just like, hey, play a bunch of Lightning characters, get rewarded for said Lightning characters. I was super duper high on it, so much so that I built Mono Lightning. Was one of the very first decks I built to test this set. And in testing, I have to admit my opinion on him has continued to go down and down and down. So for the most part, they seem to think the going rate for breaking a forward is 4 CP. Well, this guy costs 5. Right. So to me, he's very much focused on his second effect, the control 8, because if you just play him just for the break, it's fine, but it's
Yeah.
You know, forwards are getting cheaper. If they played a 2-cost multi-element or 2-cost that drew them a card, they've paid for that card. Like, that's not really efficient for me to spend 5 to get rid of that thing. So clearly the revival is kind of, to me, what he's all about, especially because the revival is unrestricted. I did it. I tried the Nidhogg thing. I only got to do it once, but I did get to do it. However, and I put him in Mono Lightning Scions. 1, 8 is very difficult to get to. Even with 5 backups, it can be difficult to get to 8. 2, the few times I got to 8, it was just overkill. Like, it's like, okay, I can play him to revive Alice, to revive, like, it was like, but they don't even have enough forwards for me to take out. Like, he's going to take out the only forwards, so then the Alice Ishtola, like, they just came on, they don't get their entry effect. So the more I played with him, the more I was just like, man, like, it's just so hard to line up that fantasy turn I wanted, where you get the 3-for-1, and then whatever else you revived has this crazy revival effect. Not saying it's not great when you get there, but just, I don't know, he just didn't line up the way I thought in my head. Maybe I overblew him. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a tempo card more than a value card. I think a lot of people looked at this and like, oh, look at the value on that card. You know, it's just like insane. I kind of think of it like the equivalent to Thancred in the Water Lightning version, but it's for Mono Lightning. Like, you can't play the Water Lightning Thancred in Mono. It just doesn't work, you know? So you kind of have to play something else. I think this is kind of the same card. And you'll note that Thancred was really good in the Water Lightning deck, but you had to have the board. You needed to be pushing the tempo. So I think the Zand is very much the same thing. The card is really, really strong when you resolve all of the text. You need to be pushing tempo to ever resolve all of the text. And so I think in that regard, you kind of have to consider him a little bit more while you're building, you know, like, okay, I need to get 5 backups really quickly, and I can't necessarily afford to be playing like Orisha and so like this Chaos Arc package or whatever, because that just inhibits how quickly you can build a board in the first place, you know. So maybe Scions is the right place, or maybe you end up playing more monsters because that kind of increases the number of lightning characters you have on board to use this card a little bit better. So I know we were very, very focused on, you know, like Scions and Summons, because those are where the best value cards are. Maybe, you know, you start consider playing, you know, Black Knights or stuff like that, so that you can kill Zidane and kind of increase your board and then resolve a Zand for something, you know. So I think you definitely have to. You're not going to see immediate success with the card if you just jam it into every Mono Lightning deck that you play. Not that it would be bad there. I think you could definitely play 1 or 2 in basically every Mono Lightning deck, but where you're really gonna see like the card come out and shine is when you actually like think about, you know, how quickly am I going to be building up to this 7+ himself. So like, how quickly am I getting to 5 backups? How quickly can I get to 5 backups and then also have 2 forwards and be pushing the tempo? So you're gonna get really, really rewarded when you have those tempo focused lightning decks or you know, those kind of monsters and stuff like that. So I think that's where this card is going to come out.
Very good, very good. Next we have Shantoto, who there's so many of these cards that have this effect, like, hey, if you got a bunch of different elements, blast them for however many different elements you control. But if you're playing a bunch of different elements, chances are you're probably playing good old reliable backup clearing Shantoto. So I don't really care for this card, and 3 just seems like an awful lot. That being said, I talked to some people who played like their pre-release kits this weekend, and I heard it was very good there when you naturally had a bunch of different elements.
Yeah, I believe that, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, seems kind of like just a limited card. When I first saw this revealed, I thought it was a 2-drop, and I was still kind of like, eh. And then when I realized that it was a 3-drop, I was like, oh, no. Like, that's just, it just seems very weird that they put this at 3. I guess it was specifically for limited, but
yeah. Next, we have Trey, one of the best cadets we've gotten in a long time, and I don't think that's saying much because he actually doesn't do anything special. We've had this kind of tribal effect around for so long that enter the field, get back one of that tribe or of that job for a long time. That being said, he's about as good as you could hope for a card for this to have. He's got EX Burst. He's going to get back any cadet, doesn't matter, forward, backup, etc. And then to boot, he's got a special. And I love specials on backups because normally the extra copies are just dead cards in your hand. Here you can turn them into something. That being said, of course I got a nitpick because it's cadets. The special is a bit expensive. Like, I used it multiple times, and it's better than nothing, but paying 5 for 9K, it's not only just 5 too. You're paying a lightning, a colorless, and you have to dull them, and you have to have a specific card in hand. All that for a 9K shot. Again, I'd rather have it than not, but I was like, man, this special is, I wish it was just a little cheaper, maybe 4. If it was 4, I think I would like it a bit better. But nonetheless, Trey is a welcome addition to the crew.
Yeah, best cadet card in the pack outside of Ace. Maybe the best cadet card outside of Ace. I may even be better than 9, I think, which is kind of the old one. I mean, the Fire Lightning Legend one, just because they'll never give us a good target for that, I guess. But yeah, good card. Nothing really to speak of it. Good that it can add backups. It'd be nice if we had a few more Lightning Class Hero Cadet backups, so that you could actually resolve the EX first on this pretty consistently. But it is what it is.
Yeah. Not for cadets. Well, it sounds like we need to bag on cadets more. So here's 9. You obviously mentioned his old legend version. Again, I heard these did really well in a lot of pre-releases because cards like this are just kind of built for a sealed environment where they're hard to get rid of, and he has this repeatable effect. I shades of the old Lon from Opus 16 that he could dull on both your turn, your opponent's turn. I like that effect. It's neat. It is hard to get around when combat matters. That being said, obviously, dulling isn't as strong as just outright killing them, which the old Legend 9 did, but we also know what a pain in the ass that card was to get online. I mean, he's not bad. I don't know. I know I sound so down on him. There's nothing wrong with him. I like him. It's just, again, it didn't help the package. It's not like, okay, now that this 9 is here, cadets can finally take off. It just felt like another, there's another one. Enjoy.
Yeah, I think if you were going to build Mono Lightning Cadets right now, this would probably be so you'll put an Ace in Trey, and then I guess maybe put in this one because it was really not any better option. It is not an awful card by any stretch. If you're playing against other mid-range strategies, this is going to be a pretty useful card. It blocks really well, it attacks really well, it controls the board relatively well. I imagine it's really, really good against Ice Lightning, for example. It seems really strong again, when your opponent is trying to hit you with Yasholda and Rufus and Sephiroth, all of these on attack trigger cards. It just seems very obviously quite good against those kinds of decks, or against 13 or I guess maybe even against the OTK version of Scions when you're doing Xenos. You can put the Xenos down, and that helps a lot. That being said, am I excited to play this against any deck that is above my tempo, or below my tempo, where they're playing wind or whatever? It just literally does nothing. There's no threats. So I mean, if you're going to play cadets this set, I imagine, and you're not gonna play Fire Lightning because the old 9 is just way better than this one. But if you're going to play Mono Lightning or Lightning Wind, then I guess this is the 9 that you play, and this is probably the thing that you're most happy to have. Is it really that good? No.
Yeah. Nope. Sorry, buddy. Next we have Nilika. Normally I kind of blow past cards like this. However, for being a weenie, it actually has decent text. It seems pretty easy to give it haste. That was the theme of this set, is you just have to control 2 of whatever category. And then again, it's an on-attack dull. The 3K, I don't know how much that matters. Maybe if you're playing some Wind Lightning version and then you combo it with a Ritz or something, that adds up. I'll be surprised to see this show up unless there's some Brave Exvius package I'm forgetting about. But I mean, for its text, it honestly seems okay.
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned that this might see play in 4A, and I thought that was insane. There's just no room for the cards like this there. But yeah, I mean, technically you have the FFB characters, I guess, so there is that. It's just back fodder. I think this is a limited card. It is pretty solid in limited. Just any kind of on attack dull in limited and getting haste is just good there. I wouldn't expect to see it anywhere else really. Yeah. So.
Next, we have a very stern-looking Palom. Would this have been too strong if he equaled his cost? So 4 cost 7K, you can hit forwards of 4 or less for 9,000. I mean, it's got a burst, so maybe that's what they're worried about. It is a black mage, so if you're still playing black mages, it's something you can discard to waltz. But then, of course, that does mess up with the backup Palom if you're doing the fire version. It's not terrible. He just seems so limited in what he does. And at least for me, I've kind of liked that lightning has moved more towards this straight break effect. Like, I don't know, if I wanted to ping someone for damage, I feel like fire's where I'd go. So I don't know. He's not really speaking to me. I just find him very kind of, how do you see him?
Yeah, I think if I had to guess, is that they wanted to keep these, like, Black Mage can only kill 3 or less thing going. Like, that might be what their line of thinking is, but that basically doomed the card to, like, unplayability, I think, you know, like, the whole thing with Black Mage is, like, God, I really wish I could just kill, like, that Weiss, or, you know, that Madame Adel or whatever, like, and you just can never do it. So, yeah, this doesn't really change anything in terms of that dynamic. It's not awful, you know, like, having it, if it was cost 4 or less, like, the EX burst would actually be pretty strong, all things considered, but, being relegated to 3 or less, there's just not enough good targets, and, you know, can't kill Cecil, can't kill Rufus, can't kill Weiss, you know, there's just too many things that it can't kill, and that's too detrimental to the card, I think.
Yeah. Well, next we have Furion, who I, just within talking to you, now have new insight on, because I like this card a lot. I like the Amano art, but it was begging for haste. You're like, oh, Brave, can attack twice, 5k. But it's got to wait a whole turn, and that turn, at least in the few times I've tried it, he always just dies. He becomes a 3k, and they just remove him with whatever little ability. But then what you said on Gilgamesh, well, maybe that was intentional because they don't want you to, surprise, here's all these attacks out of nowhere. Like, they want you to have to work for that. His second auto ability reads incredibly strong. Wow, any forward enters and you dull a character, you can push a monster out of the way, push it back up. But in the testing I did, that just never really came up. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it just didn't seem to be relevant for the matches I was playing. So I like him. He's obviously a warrior. He's a rebel. Those could fit with certain things. And against the right deck, the 4 dull was very easy to get online. But as you mentioned, there are some decks that actually was quite difficult to get online. So he looks really cool. I hope this isn't another one of those, like, yep, there's a lot of words on him, but it doesn't matter, and no one ends up using him. How do you see him?
Yeah, I found this is, like, one of the most difficult cards to evaluate, just because, like, when he works, he does exactly what's written on the card, and it's really good, you know, and then sometimes I'm playing against Wall, and I can't play him to the field because he's just gonna die, and let alone, like, hasting him or whatever, and my Lightning deck is having trouble killing the Cecil. I'm just like, well, okay. You know, it's just very sad. I don't know. I think if he had a way to give himself, like, inherent haste, he would just be, like, way too strong. Like, I think that seems very clear. It would just be really, really good. The bottom text, it's good. You know, it's been really good at helping push damage when I do have, like, a lot of other haste threats. And I could see a world where, like, maybe you play the Lightning Ace or, like, some other attack trigger cards, and then this Furion, and you play Rugagine, and you just kind of are a tempo Lightning deck. I could definitely see a world where that's the case. Seems really, really easy to put in 7 points of damage. Rugagine makes all of your dreams come true, I guess. But it doesn't really work on, like, turn 1 either, though, because he still doesn't get the double attack. So I'm not, like, really sure, like, how I'm supposed to be valuing this card, how useful it actually is in the grand scheme of things, and even for, like, a hyper aggro deck, you know, you're not going to be able to turn on the double attack. So I'm not like, really sold on Furion in general. That being said, like, the power ceiling of this card is really just so high. And, you know, there's so many things that support 1-drops, and so many things that give haste and lightning, and, you know, like, there is so much synergy text with the card that I would be really surprised if we never saw it, but I just am not seeing the natural home for it coming to fruition right now. So,
yeah. Speaking of which, let's go all the way back to Opus 7 to pull out this Dragoon. Man, does this read like an old card or what? It chooses an active forward, that's old school Lightning, just does 4k, and then bumps it up if you have 4 backups. Like, legit, this sounds like an Opus 7 card. Honestly, if this didn't say Dragoon, I'd probably dismiss it outright. However, that deck's always looking for better Dragoons, better removal. Granted, I don't think this, like, catapults the deck into anything different, but it's a Dragoon, so maybe it'll show up there.
Yeah, the classic meme is, the dragoon deck is like one card away from being top tier competitive. This is not the one, this is not the dragoon you were looking for. Maybe it's better than some of the dragoons are like really bad. Like there's like a 5-cost one I think that deals like 6k to an active forward or something like that. Like this is probably better than that, I guess.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, maybe it goes in dragoons. I don't know. Somebody else can figure that out.
Yeah. Well, that's it for lightning, so we'll go ahead and splash our way into water. Speaking of someone else can figure it out, here we have Ash, which is a terrible name and a very mediocre effect. And she's not even a princess, so you can't even search her out.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't really have anything to say about her. Do you?
I think if you're gonna play Regagine at L3, you need a certain amount of attack triggers. Yeah, maybe there's you have Rufus, you have Ash, there's Sage that works with Griever. Maybe that's like a thing you do in L3. I don't know.
Well, a card that will need
definitely not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Go ahead, finish.
Oh, it's definitely not making the cut in standard.
Yeah.
So.
Certainly not up to her other mono water full art, but something that will be. We have Gao. God, I love this mono art so much. I think I think this was in the original FF6 little instruction booklet. So good. This card is just obviously nuts for monsters. The fact that it can become completely free is kind of baffling to me. Like, it's the difference between reducing to 1 and free is just insane. Like, you wouldn't think it, but that 1 CP makes all the world of difference. And then the removal basically says if you're playing a monster deck, hey, whatever you need to get rid of, put it at the bottom of their deck, which isn't one of the best forms of removal, probably second only to remove from the game entirely. And then you dull it. What's funny is I thought his action ability was like, how often is that going to come up? But I've heard a lot of examples like, well, you could turn like a Scale Toad into an attacker all of a sudden, or this other thing that normally your Ram suddenly can become an 8K. And it actually says choose one monster. You can force your opponent's monsters to become a forward too. And I was like, wow. So like this card just seems absolutely nuts, absolutely bonkers. If you're playing the monster stuff, I don't see why you wouldn't jam Gao in there because everything about him just reads like absolutely insane.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be like the best card of the set when I started playing, and then as I started playing more, like hyper aggro seemed like more of a problem at every stage in testing, and then I started wanting to, like play decks that don't just like lose to Vanille Hope a lot of time, and as much as I hate to say it, like the Hippocampus deck, even that's like really jams out monsters as fast as possible. Like this card just like wasn't quick enough online to really compete with those kind of things. Monsters also additionally like kind of struggled with dealing with wall decks in general, just because like sometimes they have access to Alexander, sometimes like your start is just too slow to really inhibit them with Flans, or maybe you're playing Earth Water monsters. I think this deck is definitely most at home in the Earth Water variant that plays all of the cantrip monsters, because those just kind of jam it out really, really quickly. And this card is just on color there, so I think that the card is obviously really, really strong when you are playing these dedicated decks. I'm not sure that it like really changes the dynamic in a strong way. I think the plan was always basically to put a bunch of monsters on the field and then capitalize on the cards that are gonna that like reward you for doing so. The Hippocampus or Montleonis if you're playing the Mono Earth version and stuff like that. And it's like, well, like this card coming out didn't really change any of that in a significant way. It is a good card for those decks. I did have a lot of trouble with this in Mono Earth specifically, just because you play fewer monsters than some of the other ones. You're kind of capped out at around 14. It's really hard to get more than that. And when you only play that many, and some of them are like, sacking themselves, like Mandragora, it doesn't really stay on the board after you've gotten your counters and stuff like that. Well, that doesn't help when you can't play the Gao off color, and so that kind of has been an issue. I'm not really sure it's good for the Mono Earth variant or not. It might be okay as just a one of anyways, but you can't search it off Ingus either. Yeah. It's like, I thought this was like by far the best card in the set, and now I'm just like, well, it's really good, but I don't think it's quite as good as I had hoped when I had first seen it spoiled, or when I had first seen the full spoiler of the set either.
Yeah, fair. Very fair. Well, we'll see what you think about Kraken. I know you weren't over the moon about a lot of the chaoses. You know, maybe this card's a good branching point for a discussion because I haven't heard anyone talk about this. It doesn't sound exciting, but its text, assuming its condition is online, and in mono water, that's usually pretty easy with all the monsters you put out. Its text says pay 5, draw a card, so it's a soft 3, and kill anything. Kill anything on their board, any forward. And that doesn't sound exciting? Or like I myself am not like, wow, that's like, yeah, I don't know. Would I play that? Like, what would I take out in that deck? I don't know what does that say about the game that a 5-cost draw a card and kill anything on their board is like, I don't know. Like, am I crazy here? Like, please help me.
So I think like our conception in mono water of like what removal is supposed to look like, it's just like totally skewed by how busted Ash is. And, like everything is just like, well, how good is it in comparison to Ash? And it's like, yeah, it's definitely worse than Ash.
Yeah.
So like it's difficult to justify. It's not unthinkable that, you know, you play like one of this, and especially because like Leviathan is becoming so much less popular, or Primal Leviathan is becoming so much less popular, and it's more difficult to actually resolve the ability than it ever has been before. Like, this is a passable in between of like castable cards and things that you would want to revive off of Lena. Like, there's a good in between there for this card. And I think, you know, maybe it's not impossible that you play one of it, but I'm not excited to put it in my deck either. You know, it just seems meh. Like, if it had 9K, I'd be like, okay, you know, like maybe it'd be a little more passable, but like, it's at the 8K, it's at the Amat margin. You know, if they Amat the top text and that puts you at 6, then the bottom text doesn't resolve to you. That's really, really sad for the card. If it was a 4K at 8, then I would also be a lot more, like, you know, at the Tiamat line, I would be a lot more excited to play it. But I think it's just at the right crossroads of just, like, a little too difficult to get 7. Even in mono water, you have to be playing a lot of the monsters to do it. Maybe a little too underwhelming to be casting off of Lena. I think it's at those crossroads where it's like, really marginal.
Yeah. Well, sorry, Kraken, back in your shell you go. Here we have Sage, who was so funny because when I first saw this card, I was like, well, that sucks. It's an objectively worse version of Rosa. Like, Rosa does the same thing, but better. And then I saw a bunch of people abusing it with Griever, and I was like, oh, well, maybe that doesn't matter because maybe you just want as many like hits and names as possible to get Griever online. So, yeah, he's very straightforward. He does what he does. He's clearly meant to be there to abuse Griever or Une or whatever effect you want. Again, Rosa technically is better, but he's also multi-playable. So if you could get Griever, Sage, like you've won to the moon. So yeah, he's very straightforward. He does what he does. Abuse an action ability.
Yeah, that totally sums it up. I definitely was like, oh yeah, it's pack fodder. It's just another Rosa, and then I was like, well, some decks I would just like play 5 or 6 Rosas. That's like, and then I did, and it was great, you know. So it's like, yeah, it's definitely limited to a very specific set of things that you want to do. Like with Griever is like the very obvious home for these kinds of effects. Like you generally are playing the Griever turn 1, so you have a pretty small hand, so you want to have more of them in the deck if at all possible. So it works really well there. I think the other place that you could potentially see it if there's like a Turbo Une kind of strategy that was going on where you don't tend to... I think the closest one is the Summoner build that was going around, maybe. You might consider playing some amount of these in like a similar style of deck to just try to, you know, really turn on Une as quickly as possible. That, and, you know, obviously it works well with the wall too, so if you're playing Cecil in that kind of strategy, then, you know, there could be something to do there as well, so... yeah, it seems totally fine. I have no bad words for this one. It's just, yeah, solid.
Next we have Sahagin. Perhaps you'll have some bad words for this one. I mean, they make these bounce effects. They've made them cheaper and cheaper and cheaper on different monsters and backups, and just none of them sound appealing. I don't know if, again, because bounce is just such a weird form of removal, especially in a game where you can discard cards for CP. You're technically giving them power back. Like, I like the second effect that it's unrestricted and you can kind of hold it in reserve, but the first effect being limited. I don't know, and there's already so many good water monsters: Tonberry, Blue Worm, Echidna, Tros, like, and a lot of those have been starting to just get cut just because of space. Like, I don't see anywhere where you're gonna slap this guy.
I see one place only that's mono water Leo, if that's still a strategy that people are doing. This is a lot worse than like Quidov at killing the weenies. You know, Quidov is just always going to kill the Iridia and stuff like that. And bouncing the Iridia is obviously like a lot worse than killing it outright. And it might be better in like some really niche situations as like your borderline one cost monster that Realm is getting out of the deck. So like you can, if you do the 5-cost Realm, you can get Tross and Sahagin, and sometimes it gives you an extra drawback. And like the bottom text is really good at bouncing your own Leo, which is something that the deck kind of struggles with. It's kind of played Sahagin Chief as like the main way, and then sometimes it plays the extra 2 CP Sahagin, it just to discard from the hand to bounce your own Leo to play it again, kind of like a pseudo Chocobo kind of effect. And this does kind of tick the boxes. It's not really good at any of its jobs. It's not good at dealing with the weenies because it's bouncing them instead of killing them outright. It's not really good at bouncing the Leo because it costs 3 to do it, but it does tick those boxes, so maybe it could be a borderline in that.
Yeah. Well, next we have one of our last colored Strangers of Paradise forwards. This is Jed. At first I kind of scoffed at the removal. I was just like, bouncing. But this doesn't bounce. It puts it on top of their deck, which is interesting for 2 reasons. One, if you're attacking, you know what's going to be there, so you can avoid EX burst. 2, you've basically crippled their draw for the next turn as you force them to draw a card that both of you know what it is, so they're only getting 1 fresh card of new information. So that is quite nice. I'm a big fan of these old school, like, this reminds me of the Opus 9 Legend Rosa, that was like just blanketed protect everyone by 1,000. Yeah. So I like that. I like that he's not just restricted to Strangers of Paradise on that, and that he protects all water forwards. He's also technically a samurai. It's hard to see that mattering, but I guess it's there just in case. He seems fine. Again, I'm not really sure what to make all the Strangers of Paradise stuff in general, but yeah, he seems solid.
Yeah, this is, I think, probably the worst of the 4, but it's still potentially just good enough to consider playing one of it if you're playing, Jack in your wall deck, or if you're playing Jack in so I guess if you're playing Jack in like a 2-color deck or whatever, then you're probably going to play 2 of this. But it's fine. Like we've seen that like the putting on top of the owner's deck is particularly relevant on like cards like Fisoya, like the 5 CP Fisoya that wants you to cast with multiple colors. Like it is good. The problem is the deck that's like most set up to use Jack and like all of his party members can already play Fisoya, so like it's difficult to justify a slot for this over some other water card in the wall deck, and I think that's the biggest detriment to this card, even though there's nothing outright wrong with it.
This next one's a mouthful. This is Spring Serpent General Mealy Alipo. What a name.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Again, another one of these general cards. None of the colored ones are like super impressive. That being said, I like that you do get a card back at least when this dies, and especially if you only paid 2 for it, it basically paid for itself. And the action ability hitting 2 forwards isn't terrible. You could use it, again, to abuse something like a Griever or Une or whatever. Granted, you have Sage and Rosa for that, but as another copy, maybe. So, again, I'd be surprised to see it show up in a constructed deck, but out of all of them, I kind of tend to like this one.
Yeah, this one is the most marginal of all. Like compared to Rosa and Sage, I think this one is a lot more marginal because you have to wait a whole turn to get the active thing going. So a lot of the way that the game plan works with like those Griever kind of decks is like you play Griever on turn 1. Turn 2, you play, you make him discard, and then turn 2, you immediately play Rosa or Sage and reactivate the Griever, and you get to use it again, like right off the bat. This card, it's a little more difficult to consider playing it because you're not really super well prepared to activate 2 things until much later in the game, Additionally, you're probably not going to get the discount if your turn 1 play is Griever. Like, you're kind of far away from having 2 water characters on the board to discount this. So, I don't know. It's not unthinkable that you would play it in that kind of deck, but it seems like worse than Rosa and worse than Sage, and are you playing like more than 6 reactivating your forests? It's like you're getting pretty far away from where I would consider like the Griever deck to be. So yeah, this one unfortunately seems like the worst set of the bunch, but it's still, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like there's just better alternatives, I think.
Yeah. Next we have Theodore. Man, this is a perfect example of a theme over substance, I guess. I've played the After Years. I actually really like this character. Like, I liked that story. I just wish like every single one of his cards are tied to his parents or tied to the Four Crew. Like,
yeah,
and they all just like, because he had one similar to this. I think it was Opus 11, where like he could come out for free, but he doesn't do anything. Yeah, but he doesn't like. Can I just get one of them that like draws a card or makes something lose power, or like the wind one was the only one that like, oh, it actually had like an effect, but even that was kind of limited. So sure, free is nice, sure, 1,000 bump is fine, but just like, I don't know, he's just so plain and boring. I'm just waiting for that Theodore that's not plain and boring.
Yeah, I don't think this changes a lot. Obviously, you're supposed to play it with the water Cecil so that you can pay the crystal and then immediately get a crystal back. You know, it seems good. There's nothing wrong with it. It seems totally fine in that deck. It's just, yeah, plain boring. I'm not sure if like the 1k buff is super important. I mean, it is definitely nice to get your baseline up to like 9k on the Cecil, but yeah.
Yeah. Next, we have Loporrit 2.0. This is Astrologian. Again, kind of like Loporrit, just a little different. This one, you look at 3. Actually, it's very, it fits in with the card fortune telling of that job, is that you put one in your hand, one on the bottom, and one on the top, which is kind of nice because you can, if you have like an EX, you could sculpt that. And then the action ability, again, if you got to get rid of it, it's a little pricey. You're essentially paying 3 to draw a card, but I'd rather have that than no text. Yeah, is it better than Loporrit? I don't know, because they kind of do different things, but it's still a 14 backup, so it still helps Grahatia. Yeah, I like this one. I'm excited to try this one and just see how it kind of plays out like versus Loporrit.
Yeah, so resolving this, it's like people have this all the time. Is it better to like kind of like draw cards and then like filter your hand, or is it better to like sculpt your next draw and get the card that you want out of the top 3? Lots of like card games have these kinds of similar comparisons on cantrip effects. I tend to like this one a little bit better. It's kind of like there's really not a whole lot like it, you know, picking one, putting it on the top. It's kind of like, I guess sleight of hand is maybe the closest, but in Magic. But yeah, I have a hard time saying it's better than Loporrit, because Loporrit lets you filter the cards that are already stuck in your hand out, and this one doesn't really help with that effect. So I think there is like a specific difference if you're playing Chaos Arc, for example, or if you want to get rid of the Shinri in your hand. Obviously, there's like a lot of stuff like that. Or I guess in some other decks, you know, you want to put the Wind Cecil for your Earth Cecil back on the bottom of your deck. Obviously, Loporrit has some kind of extra synergies in that sort of deck. However, like, if you play this card and you're looking for a backup and you add the backup to your hand, put a forward on the bottom of your deck, put an EX burst on the top against aggro, like, you obviously got a lot more mileage than a Loporrit would ever give you. So I think the ceiling on this one is a lot higher, but there are some specific things about how Loporrit functions that you might consider playing Loporrit in your deck over this. I would be tempted to try this first in most generic decks, because it might just be better a lot of the time.
Excellent. Most excellent. Here we have Desh. So this was only revealed when the full set was revealed. And so the first thing I see is, oh, this has got a full art. Oh, this is a name I think maybe we only have one other card for. And then, and I kid you not, this is my thought process. Is I see that if a character, and the moment okay, this is going to be some complicated effect because it wants some kind of condition. And at the end of the day, it just reduces his cost. That's it. And he's just a body, and he has no effect. I was just like, well, what? Really? Like, you mentioned Ash earlier. Ash is a 1-cost, 9k EX burst that kills something. We're just past the point of like a body, and it doesn't matter if he's a cheaper body. I mean, shoot, would that have been busted to make him free? Like, if you needed to meet this condition and it reduces by 5, would you play him then? I don't think anyone would. So like, the fact that you still want me to pay 2 for him on top of that, like, I like the full art. His art looks neat, but just I couldn't believe. I was like, wait, where's the rest of the text? Where's the like special thing that happens when I do that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I read this card 3 times. It only took about 5 seconds to read it 3 times, but yeah, I was like, no, there's got to be something that like I'm not understanding. When I was like, what? But it's just pack chaff that they gave a full art. It feels so wasteful to give this a full art of all things. Like, this is the most uninspired. I wouldn't care if the card is bad and it got a full art. Like, that's fine, you know. Like, it's the most uninspired effect I've ever seen, though. That's what's really sad about it. It's just like so. Ugh.
Poor Desh. Next we have Gladiator or Paladin. That's the water crystal backup. We'll move past that to Ninja. Yeah, I've heard this card was quite good at pre-release. I haven't seen it in anything constructed. Clearly, what makes it interesting is the back attack. It is unlimited bounce. You know, it's not restricted by a cost or a type or anything like that. So that is nice. And if you pay for a crystal, which I think you want to. I do not think you want to pay 5 to have to jam this thing out there. But if you can pay 2, back attack, surprise, bounce something, I think that's fine as a rate. Where are you going to put this, though? Again, mono water is already such a nicely slotted, tight deck. I don't think it's got room for things like this. I think I'd rather have a summon, which is basically what this is anyway. So I don't hate it. I'll be surprised if this shows up.
Yeah. I have no qualms with like the effect of the card. It's fine for what it does. I don't think it's particularly powerful. It's just like I totally agree. It's like, where are you gonna slot this card? You're never gonna find like a place where you're like really, really happy to slot this. Even in ninjas where you would expect like this card to do, like, they don't make crystals a lot of times. It's like it has like the one backup that we don't really play very often. It's not very good. So like yeah.
Next, we have a whole new set. It's crazy we've gone this far, and now we're just talking about this brand new archetype or tribal. Here we go, Pirates, baby. Yeah. VK, I have tested this. I've tested it quite a bit. I can say this. I'm glad he can become free, because I would not want to pay for this card. At least in I think I did 4 matches with Pirates, and not once did his field effect come up, ever. I was just like, oh, maybe I was playing against the wrong decks. Maybe he's meant to be against fire. I don't know, but it just never came up. They would either just kill him or Shantoto the board or Shinryu the board, in which case he's just irrelevant anyway. Or Hecaton Kyre the board, because that gets through it as well. So I'm glad he can become free, because I never found that field effect to be relevant. But obviously, if you're trying to play Pirates, you're gonna play this guy, right?
Yeah, I think it's just a pretty clear, like, it's another 0 CP4 that you put onto the board, and sometimes it is going to protect you from something, like, it's obviously good against, like, Elvis and, stuff like that, so it's not like there's nothing, or, like, Warrior of Light is probably the other big one, like, if Warrior of Light Rosa would probably just be a win condition against Pirates if this card didn't exist, so there's also that. It's not particularly, like, outstanding as an effect. Like, it's just kind of fine. It's just like, well, it's free and you're going to do it anyways, and it's like the best option that you're going to have in the deck for something else to do, so might as well.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Pirates, let's get to the main lady herself. This was a card of the week, and for me, it was a very underwhelming card of the week, as I read it multiple times, like, am I not seeing something here? As my Discord's blown up, oh my god, Pirates, I'm so excited, this is going to be so busted, and I was like, what? And looking at the back of the card, is there text on the back of this thing that I haven't seen? Again, I've tested her in the Pirates. I never even got to use her action ability, because no one ever just chose her that I could then redirect it, because she doesn't do anything. Like, she sets these weenies to 8k, which is fine, I guess, but like, that's it. That's not really a threat. Like, so they still put a single 9k in front of me and go, okay, well, enjoy dying to that. Like, I couldn't believe this was a legend, and if they did something, if the Vikings threatened something so that your opponent was motivated to get rid of the Ferris so she can then protect herself, I'm all for it. But she just doesn't, and like, it's great art, and yeah, she's a Warrior of Light, but there's way better Ferrises to use in those Warrior of Light decks, so like, I don't know, man. If someone can show me the light on this, please, I'll put on the eye patch and I'll join the Jolly Roger, but until then, I was just like, I don't get this card at all.
So I do think that the power matters, it kind of like lets all of your Vikings trade with, soirees or whatever it is, and it's nice that she has an ability that protects herself. you're right that you'll never use it because this just doesn't matter, right? Like it basically just could have said if you control a pirate, your opponent can't choose Ferris. It's the same thing, you know, like that's kind of the same thing. I do think that putting to power matters a lot more when you're playing some other kind of pump. So like if you can put your Vikings to 9k, it's obviously a very big difference between 8k. So I think the intention there is you're supposed to play Ferris and also like Waka or you know like some or like Leviathan or something that pumps your things by like 1 or 2k so you can put them at really untouchable levels of power. And I think that's where this card shines. I feel like BK is like the real legend for that deck because it is just a freak. It's like very easy to understand how the card is good, and like Ferris is very not easy to understand how the card is like really. It feels like an H or like an R that they kind of just like swapped with something else in the set because they needed a legend and nothing was really at the legend caliber. So.
That's fair. Just to be clear on something, if someone were to use like a Lulu where she can set something's power to 5,000, does that override the Ferris effect of making them 8,000?
Yeah, so the thing that that sets the baseline, and this is also setting the baseline, so the one that happens afterwards is the one that takes precedent.
Okay, gotcha. Next, we have Larsa, a card that I dismissed out of hand because I was just like, what? Only 4 or higher in water, and people are like, yeah, you can search water, and I was like, but you have Meryl Web for the same cost, and you have, however, someone pointed it out, he's come up a lot, which is Griever, and they said, well, if you're doing ice water, you can get Griever without seeing the Meryl Web, and you can search kind of an off color, and I was like, okay, that's a good point, and cards like this, there's always just sneaky stuff that comes up that you're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. You can go get that Ultimisia, or you can go get that Neo X Death, or whatever it is, whatever your flavor is. So I liked him more and more. I don't know specifically, other than the Griever, where he's going to go or what you're searching for with him, but surely that kind of specification is and will only get stronger as more and more sets printed. So he's a good searcher.
Yeah, I think I like this card just in general out of hand. You know, you can search Regagine with this. That's probably the thing that I searched the most with it, which is like, yeah, on the draw, you can like get a 2-drop and then play Larsa, the 2-drop, and Regagine and just start whamming away at your opponent. That was probably the best use that I found for this card was specifically searching Regagine. But yeah, it works with Griever too. There's a lot of things you do. In Mono Water, you can search for Shinryu and Ash with the same card. That's not really something that was available. I'm not sure that this really fits there because your backups are so good in that deck that, you know, I don't... But if you were really wanting to search for Shinryu, then like this gives you an option to do so. It is definitely useful for that. So, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what I'm searching for, but like... In deck building, if I have a water deck and there's like a 4 or higher that I really want to search for that doesn't really have options for, which there's actually just a lot of those kinds of like I guess for Rufus in the Griever deck if I want to like with this card. It's just generally good to have in a lot of these decks, I think, and I think it'll splash up a little more than we would have expected seeing this card right out of the set.
Yeah. Next, we have Leviathan, a card that has a nice little full art. I like the imagery. It reads insane, right? 6 CP, instant speed, put something to the bottom of their deck. Again, one of the best forms of removal, and I get a free 2 cost. Like, holy moly. And yet I haven't seen anyone talking about this card or playing it. Why? Well, because reading it, I'm also thinking, okay, how often does that line up? That you have the Leviathan, and you have a 2 cost to play in hand, and you have a forward on their side you want to get rid of. Again, playing it for 4 is nice, but like the Bahamut, okay, now you've limited it to your turn. So like it sounds nuts when it goes off, but again, as forwards have gotten cheaper, okay, but if they only paid 2 or 1 or 0 or -2 for that card, it doesn't actually matter if I got it off the field. It did its job. So I don't know. Maybe I'm underrating it, but I think that's why I haven't seen anyone talking about it or playing it. What do you think of Leviathan?
I've tried this card in a few different decks, and it was just very underwhelming every time. I think a lot of this card really suffers from similar types of removal being available in just more generically better cards. So specifically, there's the EX Burst Leviathan that bounces and puts light and dark on the top or bottom, or, you know, it's just a lot more flexible of a card, a lot easier to get your value out of, has an EX Burst, you know, stuff like that. And a lot of the times, a lot of the things that you're going to be wanting to be you mentioned that fours are just so cheap in general right now, right? And a lot of the time, the thing that you're going to want to hit with this is going to be something that if it was bounced, is still just really good. Like, so for example, Griever. Like, I would love to put Griever on the bottom of the deck, but if I bounce Griever, that is also equally game ending. Like, you know, it's not really a huge difference. And I felt like even when I was playing a deck that had like I want to say like 8 2-drop forwards, it was just difficult to time this and resolve it in a way that was profitable for me. Like when I did hit like a Griever and play a Zidane, the game was just already over because the Griever was gone. Like I didn't need the Zidane, and this doesn't really work well in Mono Water. There's just like no 2-drops that I want to play. You know, like I'd be a lot happier if this played like a 2-drop character. Yeah. Then I would be super on board. I'd be like, okay, well I'll just play more 2-drop backups from my hand with this. Then I'd be like super on board, but it's just too hard to get it to line up, and it competes so heavily with like other good EX burst water summons, like the Leviathan that I mentioned, Kuchulain, there's Atomos. It's just like it's too hard to get this to line up. I've basically lost all hope with the card.
Yeah. Oh, that's sad to hear. Well, moving on to Roos. He goes by Roos now. His original card title was actually Desh 2.0. This time it's personal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's the same card, except he can't become 0 for some reason. Like, why? If you can draw that many cards in a turn, just let him become 0. And then he can save himself technically, but again, he's just a body. And as we mentioned the comparison to Ash earlier, like, the game just isn't at the point where just a body matters. It has to do something else. Like, I like the idea. I just wish he did anything else.
Yeah, I'm in a similar place. The card is really interesting. You know, it's cool to think of, like, you know, I'm going to draw 3 cards. I'm going to play Loporrit, and then it's going to be a 2-drop. And then I can potentially have this really annoying 2-drop to deal with. And I'm like, okay, now what deck am I playing Loporrit in that I want like a 2 CP 9K? And it's just like, it just doesn't exist. You know, I'm not particularly interested in that kind of thing. And a lot of the mono water or stuff that could potentially see like a 1 of is like, well, my card draw is just Loporrit, really. It's not really getting cheaper than 4 a lot of the time. So I don't know. There's nothing like inherently wrong with it. It's just kind of, it needed like one more ability for me to really be interested in trying to play for it. You know, it's hard to consider like playing more card draw effects when there's really not a whole lot of payoff, you know?
Yeah. Next we have Layla, which is probably my favorite art of the set. It's my new server Discord image. Great job by Gen Kobayashi. I probably stopped collecting the cards physically of the set, but man, I may have to get this one because I adore it. That said, and I've tested this with the Pirates, it makes me scratch my head when I've heard so many people say, I wonder if the old Layla's better. I wonder if the old Layla's better. And she's a searcher. She goes get you your BK, your Ferris if you want it. But that's basically what she is. Man, I wish she wasn't just a 4K. I know it doesn't matter because Ferris will set her to 8. And her on attack trigger is like neat. But I remember I had this turn, I had 4 pirates. They all swung in, and I couldn't even kill that opposing 5K that was sitting there. You know, I took him to 1, and he still lived. So, like, it's fine. It's better than blank text, but it's hard. I think the idea is supposed to be that, like, oh, your 8K Vikings now will, like, get over their 8K forwards because you're shrinking them one by one. But she was fine. There was nothing wrong with her. And, again, I adore this art, but I'll ask you, too, as you talk about her. I don't know. Is the old Layla better? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this one is obvious. In my opinion, this one is just like, well, it searches for your starter Viking and it searches for BK. That's like, and I guess sometimes Ferris when it matters, but like, I would be tempted to see if the deck functions with the old Layla first, because that one just has a much higher power level. I think, you know, it's just easier to consider going, you know, well, just Layla Viking BK. It's just like, if you just draw it, it's just the same, you know, so. I don't know. Maybe this one is just more important to guarantee that you can get your BK, to guarantee that you can get the 2 CP Viking in your starting hand. I don't know. I'm not really excited to play like if this is 2 CP, I would be like way better on. Then it would just be like, well, then it's just better than the old one. But now because it's 3, it's like, well, am I gonna take an extra turn or discard an extra card? I don't know. I'm not a Viking aficionado, but I was kind of disappointed seeing this card. I kind of thought maybe it would have one extra line or the bottom line of text would be a little more inspiring than it is, but
yeah,
it is what it is.
Well, something that should knock your socks off. This is Lena. After reading all those water cards that basically didn't have text, when I saw this in the card browser, I was like, well, hello, who are you? Lena always gets good treatment. 2 incredibly relevant jobs, Princess and Warrior of Light. And she's an EX Burst. And she's got EX Burst Hate. And she's got a special that's actually not only relevant, but cheap. Like, my goodness, it's cheap.
Yeah.
And it has a wide range. Like, I mean, this card's just... It's so good. It's beautiful Amano art. And while it doesn't shut off EX Burst completely, and I'm still hoping for that card that does, I saw a mirror match. My opponents, I was watching this game between my buddies. They both had Lena on the field. One of them attacks in. He hits the Kucha lane, which normally is like, okay, blank that, draw a card. And he was like, I don't know if I want to use it now because I don't want you to draw a card. Like, it's pretty impressive how much of a mitigating factor that is of like, well, I'm going to draw if you do that. So like, and it can be searched out by Sarah. Just, my goodness, obviously conflicts with the mono water forward Lena. But other than that, this card is just beautiful.
Yeah, this card is awesome. It ticks every box. I think this is probably what Ferris's rarity got switched with. I guess this was like the water legend, and they just like, but we need to make this an H, like really bad. Otherwise, it's going to be too expensive. You know, people are going to, and so they just decided to make this an H instead. That makes a lot of sense now that I think about it. But yeah, anyways, this ticks all the boxes. You know, it's a 2 CP. It's a princess. You can search off Sarah. It's a warrior of light. The card name is Lena, so you can search it off of King Tycoon. So this is the other thing. You can Claris into King Tycoon into Lena now, and King Tycoon also has an EX burst, and like Claris also has an EX burst. You get these like free insane like backup chains that all have EX burst, and that's just like, you know, really really impressive. The S ability is fantastic. You know, there's nothing to be said about it. Like, it's just I would have thought that there would be a restriction on it. You know, like it's a like you have to do it on your turn, or like even like you have to do it during your main phase or whatever. Yeah. But like there's just like no restriction on it whatsoever. Just like, yeah, dude, go crazy, bro. I don't care. You know, like do what you want. I was like, really? Like it feels, yeah, it just feels nuts. I don't know. I'm excited to brew Warrior of Light decks with this. I'm excited to brew Wall with this. I already have this. Actually, I already have a Wall deck with this. Can't lie. But yeah, it's fantastic. I've just had a great experience with the card overall. I would expect this to be one of the best backup targets that we have at the end of backup chains for a long time going forward.
Absolutely. The true water legend. And we'll end with water on Refia here, who, like, I like the idea, especially if they're going to push WAF to this kind of fire ice. I like the idea of it giving recursion, because playing it, like you were commenting on earlier, there were times I wondered, I was like, is the Earth version better? Like, with the Kusith and the recursion, you can get the rain back, because you really need the rain as much as possible. But one, this Refia wouldn't hit rain even if she fit and she's just in the wrong colors. Like, she's water, and she can't even hit generic stuff. She has to hit WAF forwards. And I don't even know which WAF forward you're supposed to revive off of this, because I can't think of like a prominent 4-cost
exactly.
one. Most of them are 3 and 2, and rain is too expensive. So I just don't really get this card. I don't really understand why it costs 5, why it's limited the way it is, and like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah, I think this was a pretty clear sign that they're not interested in pushing WAF as the WAF deck into that direction. I think that what you're supposed to get off of this is Koicho Queen, I think. That is like the only target that I can think of. I mean, there's gotta be, there's like for the Legend Land and stuff like that. Yeah. But like, that is the only one in color that makes any sense. But like, am I gonna play Refia just for Koicho Queen? And like, Koicho Queen still only has really,
what, 3 targets?
It has really shit targets. Yeah, they're all like really really bad. So not particularly interested in playing those either. So I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of future where Koicho Queen is like a deck that we consider playing in Final Fantasy TCG. But no, this is just some chuff for now.
Sorry, Refia, get out of here. Well, folks, that is it for the main 6 elements. And we've only got light, dark, and some starters left to do. But you'll have to wait till part 3 for that part. And we will see you when that is there. Jared, thank you for joining me, sir. Don't go too far. We'll be back for part 3 soon. Bye.
Bye.